In the first scenes of the film, a woman is driving a car on a night highway. Suddenly, an unknown woman's voice speaking Russian comes from the radio. Joe translates for her daughter Alice, explaining that the woman believes the world has turned upside down. A police car appears behind them, and an unknown device lying next to Joe starts blinking alarmingly, but the police car drives past. Soon, the pair arrives at a small house. Joe starts a fire and puts the child to bed. She then goes outside to check the device left in the car but hears her daughter scream and rushes back inside. However, Alice is asleep. Joe runs outside again, hears her daughter scream again, and runs off into the night. 5 weeks earlier, Joe is floating weightlessly as part of a group of astronauts on the International Space Station. She only sees her daughter and husband Magnus via video calls, and she conducts her next session from the cold nuclear fusion laboratory where Mission Commander Paul is working. He adjusts the equipment according to instructions from scientist Henry Calder on Earth. The scientists are searching for a new state of matter, but no one knows what it is. Suddenly, something crashes into the space station. Communication with Earth is lost, and a fire breaks out. Additionally, the commander's hand is trapped, and one of the Soyuz ships is severely damaged. Roscosmos takes charge of the repairs while the mission's doctor amputates Paul's hand. Henry insists they must save the capsule containing the cold fusion experiment results. Meanwhile, Joe goes into open space to inspect the crash site, unaware that Paul's heart has stopped. Suddenly, video contact with Joe is lost, and the center can only hear her communications. She then sees the cause of the accident: a desiccated body of a female astronaut in an orange suit labeled USSR. Joe tries to catch it, but the space mummy floats away. Joe reports everything to her colleague, and Irina, the head of Roscosmos, hears it on Earth. Learning of the commander's death, the center orders 3 mission members to return to Earth on Soyuz 2, while Joe repairs Soyuz 1-inch and returns on it. An emergency mode is set in the ship. Joe sketches the body she saw, sends it to the center, and begins repairs. Meanwhile, Irina tells Henry she ordered his equipment to be left on the station, as it may have caused the accident. Henry argues that this experiment could change humanity's life and must be brought back. The returning Soyuz 2 astronauts are greeted on Earth. Joe is asked to retrieve the capsule with the experiment results, after which communication is lost. On Earth, Henry brings equipment for a rescue mission to Baikonur, but Irina reports that there are no signs of life on the station. Joe is alive and continues repairing the equipment, resting in the shuttle where Paul's body lies. Later, she records a message for her family, but unexpectedly hears a man's voice telling her not to breathe. She flies to the laboratory door and, opening it, sees Paul reaching out to her. Joe shakes his hand, realizing it's the commander's severed limb. Meanwhile, on Earth, Henry pulls strings to send a rescue mission to the station, avoiding questions about his twin brother. At this time, his twin brother Pat Calder is on vacation on a cruise ship, answering a journalist's questions about his spaceflight and snapping at her for confusing him with his brother. Joe restores the power supply of Soyuz 1 and returns for the cold fusion capsule. She records a final message to her family and launches the shuttle. Unexpectedly, the automatic detachment doesn't work. It must be done manually from inside the station. Joe, in desperation, punches the console as a shadow approaches the inner control panel and the system activates. The shuttle heads to Earth, where Joe is presumed dead. The module soon lands in a deserted steppe, where rescuers find Joe and help her out. She is placed on a stretcher and taken to a helicopter. However, Alice rushes to her, and Joe happily embraces her daughter and husband, who seems to doubt his wife's genuine joy at seeing him. Henry retrieves the capsule, and Joe is taken to the helicopter where her family is already seated. But suddenly, Joe finds herself alone in an empty vehicle. Then everything returns to normal. She decides it's due to stress. She speaks to her daughter in Swedish, but Alice doesn't understand her. Meanwhile, Henry rejoices over the successful quantum mechanics experiment results conducted on the ISS. Joe recovers after the flight. One day at a press conference, she expresses condolences to the widow of the deceased astronaut Paul, but the woman's name turns out to be different. Henry demonstrates the experiment results obtained on Earth. His assistant is sure this is only possible in space, dismissing it as a glitch. At Baikonur, an investigation into the tragedy begins. The commission reviews orbital recordings. When Joe mentions the object that caused the accident, a Soviet female astronaut's body, no one believes her since there has never been a report of a missing female astronaut in history. Later, Joe receives vitamin tablets she must take daily. She tries to get closer to her husband, not noticing he seems to avoid her. Alice also keeps her distance from her mother. The next day, Joe faces the commission again, which tries to convince her that the station collided with an orange garbage bag. After the session, her boss, Frederick, tries to hug her, but she steps back in confusion. He doesn't understand why she has forgotten everything between them. Scared, Jo returns to her husband in tears, confesses her love, and they become intimate. Meanwhile, Henry tells Alice about a thought experiment in quantum mechanics called Schrödinger's cat. Scientists believed the world was governed by classical physics laws until geniuses like Einstein discovered that the same substance could exist in two forms. For example, a particle is black in one world and white in another. Between worlds, there is space where the particle is both black and white simultaneously, refusing to choose until observed. Henry invented equipment for the space experiment and discovered something, but it seems unwilling to come into the light. Magnus confesses his wife has changed completely. Henry comes to thank Jo for saving the capsule. She recalls he worked on the Apollo mission, and the old man warns that people who go through the space often change. Later, the team goes to the memorial alley, and Jo shows friends a photo of the spacesuit she saw in space, but she's told it's Irina, the current director of the Flight Control Center. The colleagues reach the tree planted by Commander Paul before the flight and lay flowers. When Jo is alone, she suddenly sees Paul, who tells her his heart is still hanging in space. After this, Jo acknowledges the commission's correctness and retracts her initial testimony. Her family heads home, where Jo notices some inconsistencies. For example, the car is blue, but Jo remembers it was red. The family congratulates Jo on past Christmas and her birthday. She jokes and laughs, though Magnus admits he believed their marriage was over. The next morning, Jo walks around the house and suddenly sees a piano. She sits at it and opens the sheet music. In the evening, Jo again notices her daughter doesn't understand her Swedish, though the girl spoke it fluently before the flight. Magnus admits he knew about her affair with a colleague, Frederick. This perplexes Jo as it's not true. Henry recalls a formula where the main stress relief component is lithium-7. Jo visits a psychologist who prescribes her the antidepressant lithium. Henry notices her and invites her to see his laboratory, where he talks about astronauts who heard non-existent sounds and smells after flights. But this is kept secret. Then Henry reports to the management that using laser and magnets in the cold fusion laboratory, he obtained an image identical to the one from the quantum physics experiment on the ISS. He tried to capture the moment when a substance exists in two different states simultaneously. The same experiment with Schrödinger's cat, which can't be determined if it's alive or dead. But only Henry sees the results. Apparently, this is the observer effect, where the experiment influences the experimenter. Jo approaches the piano again and starts playing this time, scaring herself because she never knew how to play. The next day, Jo compares the vitamins she received at Baikonur with the prescribed medicine and finds that both contain lithium-7. Suddenly, she sees two workers and hides in an office, finding a list of astronauts. Each name has a letter, and checking those under B, she discovers they were all prescribed lithium-7 and experienced unusual things. Meanwhile, the workers enter the office, ignore Jo, and start stacking folders on a cart. She tries to get their attention, but seems invisible. Jo approaches a man closely. He screams and disappears. Jo is alone in the office again. She goes to Henry's office, but he suddenly accuses her of excessive curiosity that will ruin her. Later, her colleague Frederick visits, not understanding what happened as they loved each other. Jo avoids the conversation. At home, Jo finds a package with tapes on the table. It turns out the Marine Observatory workers, unlike the Flight Control Center, heard her calls from space and recorded them, now sending them to her. Jo plays the tapes and hears her voice when Alice comes downstairs and sees a room filled with mourning people. Live astronaut Paul with his family, and Jo's portrait in a mourning frame at the center. She screams, but her father carries Alice upstairs, where his wife admits all her pills are neuroleptics, meaning she's been intentionally habituated to them. She believes she was heard but deliberately left to die in space. Magnus grabs the phone to have her taken for treatment, but Jo pushes him and he falls, hitting the floor. Jo pulls herself together, calls an ambulance, and asks Alice to get in the car. On the way, she stops by the laboratory and steals the flask with the substance obtained in the quantum physics experiment. Henry hears a knock at the door but finds no one in the hallway when he opens it. The scientist closes the door, not noticing his twin brother Pat, who briefly appears behind him and then disappears. Irina calls, having just read an article about two particles entangled by quantum mechanics, where what happens to one determines the state of the other, even if they are far apart. He hangs up without responding. Jo calls Russian cosmonaut Ilya to ask what vitamins he was given on the ISS. He reads out the name with letter A. Joe explains that, unlike the rest of the crew, she was given neuroleptics. The cosmonaut is skeptical, but she asks him to check his pills and wait for her call. Henry discovers the flask theft. The next morning, Joe asks her daughter to describe her fears in detail. The girl admits she hears the voice of an unknown woman named Valia. Joe steps aside to call the observatory worker who sent her the tapes, but he unexpectedly claims it couldn't have been her and hangs up. Meanwhile, Alice brings her a drawing of her fear, showing the figure of a female astronaut in an orange suit, whom Joe saw dead in space. Ilya checks his pills, which turn out to be vitamins. However, documents on the substances given to Joe are no longer accessible. Joe arrives at the Marine Observatory and meets the brother and sister who sent her the tapes. The elderly couple clearly heard her voice from space and recorded it. However, the recordings can only be heard on their ship at sea. They take Joe and Alice to a boat, sharing strange stories of people seeing odd things in space like angels, and often going mad upon returning home. They recorded everything, but there was little noise until Apollo 18. During that mission, the airwaves were filled. Deciphering these messages is challenging. The boat sets off, and the woman plays a tape recorded in 1967. It features the voice of a female astronaut returning to Earth in a damaged capsule, seemingly dying. That day, Irina allegedly returned unharmed from space. The woman can also let Joe hear Paul's voice, though everyone says he's dead. Joe refuses to listen. They head back to shore, and Alice secretly calls her father, revealing their location. The woman gives Joe the tapes. Mother and daughter drive to a forest cabin, analyzing everything that happened. Alice plays the 1967 tape again, recognizing Valia's voice from her visions. The woman is in pain and very hot, as heard on the tape. Henry looks into a mirror, calling his twin brother. When Pat appears in the reflection, Henry accuses him of stopping his medication and admits his space experience worsened everything. Joe and Alice continue listening to Valia, who says the world is upside down. Reaching the house, Joe plays a recording of her conversation with Alice before the collision, but the girl suddenly claims it wasn't her, as she doesn't speak Swedish. The action shifts to the ISS on the day of the accident, showing the other side of Schrödinger's cat experiment. Paul conducts a quantum physics experiment while Joe talks to Alice when an alarm sounds. Joe is thrown against the window, hitting her head and losing consciousness. Paul tries to help her, realizing she's dead. Her husband and daughter are informed of her death and fly to Baikonur. On the orbit, Paul stays to repair the shuttle, worried that accessing the laboratory is impossible, leaving the experiment results on the station. Joe's body is moved to the shuttle, but Paul struggles to accept her death's reality. Later, he rests before landing, recording messages. Again, he feels Joe is alive and even asks her not to breathe. He then contacts Houston, reports the body's damage, moves her from the ship to the station section, and locks her there. Preparing for undocking, the system fails. Mission Control reminds him that 2 people are needed to activate the system. Paul, like Joe in another reality, hits the console as a shadow approaches the inner control panel, and the system activates. The shuttle lands safely. Paul's family greets him, but he can't forget what happened, feeling guilty for leaving Joe's body on the ISS. He goes to her tree, laying flowers, and suddenly sees Joe before him. They stare at each other for a moment, then she vanishes. Later, Paul tells Joe's family how she died when he sees his portrait in a mourning frame. He's distracted by a question about visiting a psychologist and snaps back to reality. Later, the astronaut appears before the commission and recounts the experiment and the accident. Suddenly, the crew members object. They know nothing about a quantum physics experiment. That project was closed 12 years ago, and the order to leave Joe's body in orbit, it was his decision, not an order he received. Meanwhile, Alice is deeply affected by her mother's loss, constantly feeling that something is off. At the same time, Paul reviews footage from the Apollo 18 mission and is surprised to discover that 2 astronauts died during the launch under Henry Calder's command. He goes to his boss, but she only knows Pat Calder. There was no equipment and no Nobel Prize. The Apollo 18 mission was NASA's biggest failure. The man returns to his family and realizes that his wife's name is different from what he remembers. Later, his family goes to Joe's house for a memorial service, but Alice is hiding in the closet again, refusing to come out, convinced that her mother is alive. Seeing his crew, Paul doesn't want to enter the house, but his wife persuades him, though he admits everything feels wrong. Then his daughter brings Alice. He turns his head and sees another Alice screaming about what's happening in the living room. Joe rushes to the sound, seeing Alice from Paul's reality and trying to call out to her mother. Magnus takes his daughter away, and she asks to be taken to her mother's cabin. The next day, Magnus and Alice go to the lake house. At night, the father confesses he doesn't understand his daughter, who insists they will see their mother again. Meanwhile, Paul visits the house of Henry's twin brother, Pat, calling him Henry and stating that he conducted experiments under his direction. He wants to know the truth at any cost, but Pat pulls out a gun and shoots him. Alice sees a car approaching the cabin, and Joe gets out. And then everything gets confusing, so friends, forgive me if something is unclear. The girl hurriedly puts on her shoes and goes outside, but it's empty in front of the house. She calls for her mother, and Joe, in another reality, from the beginning of the film, turns at her voice but doesn't see her daughter. Alice returns to the house, puts on a coat, and goes out into the night with a flashlight. Joe distinctly hears footsteps passing by, but sees no one. They wander around the same place, shouting, hearing voices, but not seeing each other. In her reality, Joe and Alice sit in the cabin, listening to space recordings again. The girl admits her memories are different. Firstly, she doesn't speak Swedish. Also, her mother said Paul conducts experiments in the lab. The problem is the mother remembers nothing about this lab. She explains that the merging of two different realities is the result of a quantum experiment aiming to capture superposition, the moment when one thing exists in different places simultaneously. The girl suddenly confesses she feels Joe isn't her mother. Meanwhile, in another world, Magnus, accompanied by Henry and the police, heads to the lake house to retrieve Alice. Joe, stepping out to check the device, hears Alice's scream from the snowy field again. But her Alice is sleeping in the cabin. Joe runs outside again, heading towards the scream. At this time, parallel Alice finds a similar cabin, but it's cold and empty. Despite the building's similarities, the girl finds many discrepancies. For example, the picture on the wall is different. She goes upstairs and finds a closet. Hanging her necklace on the handle, Alice climbs inside. But the door suddenly slams shut, and the girl starts banging and calling for help. Joe, wandering through the field, also sees this cabin. She rushes to the banging and finds Alice. Joe carries the girl to her cabin, puts her in a hot bath, and admits that Alice smells like herself again. Stepping aside, Joe finds herself between two worlds, with Alice standing by the bed in one, and the girl sitting in the bath in the other. Suddenly, the second Alice stops seeing Joe, gets out of the bath, and calls for her mother. But Magnus wakes up and runs to her. Alice admits she saw her mother, but now she's gone again. Joe, meanwhile, orders the second girl to get dressed and takes her to find the second cabin and the other Alice. Magnus's car is stopped by a blocked road, but the police inform him that a bulldozer is on the way. Alice asks her mother to come back, and Joe admits she doesn't belong to this world, urging them to figure out where the Joe from this reality went. Alice runs away, accusing her mother of madness. The second Alice goes to find the second cabin. Magnus follows her. The girl walks across the field, seeing a bead from her necklace in the snow. She follows the trail and finds a bag with a quantum device. Parallel Alice finds the second cabin. She enters, looks around, and takes an identical tape recorder, climbing into the closet. The second Alice also arrives at this closet and sees the tape recorder inside. The first Alice turns on the recorder and records her voice, calling Alice. The second Alice turns on the tape recorder and hears her own voice asking her to say something. While the girls establish contact, their parents search frantically through the frozen field and house. Joe finally reaches the closet. In her reality, Magnus approaches the same spot. Joe finds the tape recorder and hears the conversation between the two Alices. Magnus sees and hears the same thing. Terrified, he calls emergency services, reporting his daughter is missing at the lake. Joe gets into the car and heads towards the lake, as the kerosene lamp in her cabin falls and sets it on fire. The two Alices, sitting in the closet, look into the mirror and suddenly see each other. They say they are both looking for their mom. One Alice confesses that her mother died. At this moment, Joe notices the fire behind her. She turns the car around. The two Alices compare memories shared by Joe and conclude that their mothers switch places. Meanwhile, on the winter road, Henry Calder admits to Magnus that when he was on the moon, he thought his crew had died. But miraculously, they were alive. After returning to Earth, he started treatment. Rescuers finally arrive at the lake and start searching for Alice. Henry sees the fire blazing. Joe returns to the burning house, but upon entering, she finds no fire. However, the mirror reflects a burning room. Jo goes upstairs and finds her daughter in the closet, witnessing the conversation between the two Alices. Henry finds his quantum device stolen and lost by Jo. Jo hears the voice of the second Alice and sees her in the mirror. The girl asks her to come home, but Jo doesn't know how to do it. However, she promises to figure it out. She realizes the girls are dying, one in the fire, the other from the cold. She pulls the girl out and hands her to Henry, who has just arrived. Then she returns to the fire. Henry lays the girl in the snow and also calls for help, while Jo walks around the burning house. Suddenly, she sees Alice lying in the snow. She tries to revive her, hearing her voice behind. Turning around, she sees the second Alice, who suddenly says she doesn't feel her double. Apparently, the girl died, but Jo continues giving artificial respiration, believing she must save the girl. Suddenly, Magnus's voice calls out from the darkness. Jo tells her daughter to leave. Magnus sees his wife, unable to believe his eyes, and runs to her, finding his daughter. In the parallel reality, Jo revives the second Alice and starts looking for the second Alice. Rescuers grab her, thinking she's crazy. In the other world, Magnus brings Alice into the cabin, admitting he doesn't know what he saw. The injured Alice lies under an IV and suddenly hears a female voice promising to take her to her mom. The girl wakes up, seeing her father, who says Jo left with Irina. In reality, Jo is taken to a psychiatric clinic. Henry finds the tape recorder and listens to his report, discovering his colleagues are alive. He smashes his quantum device, destroying the experiment results. Magnus brings Alice home, and the girl says her mother is dead, her body still in space. Also, there is another Alice. Magnus tries to convince her that mom is alive, just not well right now. Meanwhile, a piano is brought to Jo's room. Henry is arrested for attempting to kill Paul and murdering a journalist on the ship. He requests his DNA be compared to the person who lived where Paul was shot. He's not Pat. The accuser suddenly says both men are actually the same person and shows a book written by Pat. Henry denies writing it, revealing that his so-called twin brother is actually his double from another reality. Later, Henry shows the broken device to Frederick, blaming Jo for damaging expensive equipment. He has long opposed sending women into space, believing their psyche is unstable. That night, Jo regains consciousness and tries to escape the clinic, but the door is locked. In the morning, Irina examines her, finding no mental disorders. Jo claims there was a fire in the cabin, and before that, she saw her real daughter. Irina asks her to play the piano and says her daughter is with her father. Jo is impossible to convince. Then Irina announces that Jo is pregnant. They couldn't give her lithium, as they never prescribe it to pregnant women, so they developed special vitamins for her, which Irina asks her to take. Jo is horrified and refuses. She can't have this child, because then she won't be able to return to her real life. Irina says there's another patient like her in the next room, but she won't be able to see him. Jo suddenly recognizes her as the dried-up mummy in space. She screams the words she heard on the recording, but Irina runs away. She calls Henry and asks for a meeting. Pat Calder is interrogated with a lie detector, denying shooting Paul, though he invented the machine that could cause an accident in space. Jo sits at the piano, but Ilya comes to her. She's very happy to see him, asking him to find out where Henry Calder is. But he suddenly starts convincing her that Jo is experiencing astronaut burnout, which fortunately is treatable. Jo repeats that the ISS collided with Irina's body. In that reality, it wasn't Paul who died, but her. Ilya doesn't believe her, and she asks him to leave. He says goodbye and secretly slips a key to her door, signaling that the room is bugged. Magnus tells the doctor he also saw Jo in the dark. Parallel. Magnus says he wants to get closer to this new Jo. Irina meets with Henry. He recalls her flight when she returned alive and unharmed, but years later he learned that Irina died in a space accident. She convinces him they both survived such accidents but returned, though they always felt another person nearby. Henry suddenly declares he's not Henry. He disappeared and won't return. He's the person who won the Nobel Prize. That night, Jo escapes her room, goes to the next room, and sees two identical old men. She returns to her room. The next day, Paul's daughter discusses a strange feeling with Alice. The girl feels her father's presence. Alice confesses that her mom is also halfway not here. In the parallel reality, Paul's daughter is puzzled by her father's strange behavior, who went to see a crazy old man and got shot. In both realities, Alice finishes talking to her friend and gets out of the closet. One asks her father to take her to mom in the hospital and pulls out a tape recorder. The other packs the deceased Joe's things and also finds a tape recorder. The girls simultaneously turn them on. When Joe in the hospital starts playing, they connect with each other. Later, the second Alice tells her father there's another Alice and promises she won't search for mom anymore. The prosecutor reports the complete identity of all tests, confirming that Pat and Henry are the same person, and presses charges. Sometime later, Irina comes to Joe, announcing there's only one person in the next room, the first one in space. She advises Joe to take the pills and return to life. She has a daughter and will have another child. She advises Joe to reconcile and move on. Later, Magnus and Alice arrive at the clinic. The girl talks about the other Alice and also advises her mother to accept what happened. She needs a mother, and Joe needs a daughter. So they will move on. Later, Joe shows Magnus their daughter's drawing, admitting she tries to be rational. She will return home and move on. They will have this child. Irina writes a letter admitting that since her flight, she has hidden the fact that space drives people crazy. She asks everyone who has experienced this to report it to her. At the clinic, Paul regains consciousness, unable to understand what he saw and experienced. Magnus takes Joe home, admitting she doesn't look like his wife. But they love each other and want to be a family. Irina says goodbye to Alice, admitting she has a second name, Valia. Meanwhile, on the orbiting ISS, Joe's mutilated body suddenly comes to life and catches a photo of herself with her daughter. This is where the first season ends.
Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a science fiction film called Crocodile Island. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. In the year of 1945, a couple of soldiers are flying home after winning the Second World War, but they quickly realize that something is wrong as they head inside the Bermuda Triangle. Very soon, all their equipments begin to malfunction as they see numerous giant creatures flying their way and crashing into their airplanes. The men are forced to jump out immediately and use their parachutes to break the fall just in time. When one of the soldiers finally makes it onto the island, he quickly realizes that they're not alone as he watches his friend. A massive crocodile jumps out from the water and devours the other pilot in a single bite, before leaving the soldiers stranded on the island that's filled by monsters. Many years later, a commercial airplane is also passing by the Bermuda Triangle, but the passengers are completely oblivious about the dangers that they're in. The main character, Hao, is a single father who's traveling along with his teenage daughter, Lynn, and is obviously unhappy about her new boyfriend whose name is Chan. The father demands to know how long they have been together, but is only responded by resentment from his daughter, giving him no other choice but to stare at the boyfriend in anger. Before their arguments continue, the entire plane begins to shake violently and causing all the passengers to panic in fear as they try to put on the oxygen masks. Things become even worse as the pilots realize that their equipments are failing, giving them no other choice but to slowly bring down the airplane towards the nearby island. Before the aircraft is able to reach the bottom, the people soon notice numerous gigantic birds flying their way and causing tremendous damage towards the engines. This causes the airplane to quickly drop towards the ocean, while the pilots try desperately to maintain control, but the aircraft is ripped open violently. The people are sucked outside by the pressure difference as Hao tries to make it towards his daughter, and eventually managing to secure himself onto the seat. The airplane crashes into the water as the entire vessel is drifting on the ocean, but the pilots quickly realize that something is wrong as they're heading directly towards the rocks. The aircraft slams into the island, which breaks the plane into pieces, while the passengers are tossed away like ragdolls, which causes everyone to pass out. When Hao eventually regains consciousness, he's able to rescue his daughter and bring her onto land, where they realize that only a handful of people were able to survive. The passengers quickly find out that they're stranded on the island, giving them no other choice but to gather all the resources that they can. However, the people quickly realize that there's barely any drinkable water left, and all their phones appear to have no signals in the area. Realizing that they're not going to last very long on the beach, Hao has decided to venture into the forest, where he may find more resources for the people to survive. The main character goes into the jungle alongside his daughter's boyfriend Chan, and very soon they manage to locate a small building that's surrounded by trees. The people are able to find weapons inside the shed, and most importantly, they discovered a notebook that appears to be written by a soldier from the Second World War. Luckily, one of their traveling companion is a professor who knows English, but the man quickly finds out from the journal that the island is filled by giant monsters. This causes them to head back towards the beach immediately as they try to warn their friends about the danger that they're in. On the other side, a survivor called Fan begins fighting a woman for the only bottle of drinkable water in the area. Luckily, the man's despicable actions are quickly stopped by another person called Lee, who punches the aggressor right in the face. Their fight continues onto the water as a flight attendant tries to stop the violence while no one else offers to help. Lee's pregnant wife Jia sees this and tries to stop her husband, eventually managing to pull the man away from the conflict. Before their squabble continues, the people quickly realize that something is coming their way as the flight attendant is attacked by a crocodile inside the ocean. Everyone sees this and begins running away immediately, while numerous reptiles climb onto the beach and starts devouring the humans who are too slow to escape. When Hao eventually manages to return from the forest, the people are shocked to see that everyone has left the area and leaving nothing but footprints of the crocodiles behind. Hao thinks that their friends must be still alive, which causes them to chase after the survivors immediately. At the same time, the people are continuously being pursued by the animals who devours anyone that was left behind. The survivors are eventually split into groups as they escape towards different directions, and Lin is able to make it towards a clearing alongside the husband and his pregnant wife. Very soon, they're able to find fresh water, which allows the group to recover from thirst, but Lee begins hearing noises that are coming towards them from inside the forest. Luckily, the survivors quickly realize that it's only the main character and his group, which finally allows them to reunite once again. However, before they can celebrate, the father begins noticing vibrations within the area, causing all the people to freeze in fear as they hear the noises getting louder. What the survivors don't realize is that a giant crocodile was hiding right behind the rocks this whole time, and the creature begins to show itself as it towers over all the humans. The monster approaches the nearby victim while staring at the person in anger and causing the man's bladder to malfunction in front of everyone. The people watch helplessly as the human is swallowed by the giant creature and causing the survivors to run immediately as they try desperately to escape. The massive reptile charges furiously towards the people and jumping directly at the main character, but Hao manages to dodge the attack by the skin of his teeth. The monster quickly turns the attention towards a woman who's stuck between the rocks and devouring her into its massive jaws. The people are able to escape from the area just in time as they're able to lose the creature temporarily, and Hao brings the survivors towards the building that he found earlier. The man suggests to everyone that they should camp here for the night, while touting Chan that they need to guard the area from the hostile creatures. The next morning, while everyone is still asleep, Hao decides to gather some fruits for the people so that his daughter will have something to eat when she wakes up. On the other side, Fang was able to survive alongside a woman whose name is Li Qi, but she seems to care more about getting famous than not becoming the monster's buffet. The girl quickly shows that she's nothing but dead weight, as she managed to cover herself inside a bunch of sticky liquids. Li Qi demands that Fan help her clean off the fluids immediately, but the man seems to prefer the dirty look more than than anything else. What they don't realize is that the liquids are actually from the eggs of giant spiders. At the same time, Lim finally wakes up from her slumber as she tries to go outside to look for her father, but quickly notices that they're surrounded by giant insects inside the fog. They try to wake up the others quietly so they can avoid becoming the monster's prey, and the people have no choice but to slowly walk out from the building while evading the creatures. However, their plan quickly fails when a survivor discovers a bunch of sticky liquids on his head and is immediately killed by the giant insect. The people sees this and realizes that the other monsters are moving towards them as well, which forces them to run away desperately as the creatures chase them closely behind. The commotion eventually alerts Hao, causing the men to rush back immediately after hearing the screams. The survivors continue running away from the giant spiders as they sprint across the forest, but they're quickly stopped by the massive creature who's about to devour its prey. The monster begins stabbing at the humans by using its giant legs, but luckily the professor is able to distract the creature and saving the people in the last moment. This causes the monster to chase after the man immediately as he lures the giant spider away from the others. Before the people can take a break, they quickly realize that more enemies are heading their way, forcing them to run deeper into the forest once again. The survivors try desperately to shake off the incoming enemies and eventually manages to lose the creatures while they hide inside the plants, hoping that the spiders will leave. To their surprise, the people begin hearing footsteps heading their way and soon finds out that it's the main character who notices all the monsters in the area. This causes Hao to yell towards the creatures as he tries to lure the spiders away, making all the monsters chase after him and giving the others a chance to escape. The man quickly runs back to the wood building where he finds the professor hiding there for shelter as well, but what they don't realize is that the monster is waiting to ambush them. The two tries to wait until the coast is clear, but is quickly attacked by the monster from above, while the main character tries desperately to fight for their lives. However, the professor is mortally wounded and quickly dies as a result, leaving Hao all by himself while the giant creature continues attacking him from the roof. The man is proven to be no match for the creature as he gets knocked into the walls, and the monster quickly tries dragging him back to finish the kill. Luckily, Hao is able to break free and runs away from the creature before tossing his grenade at the enemy and blowing the monster into pieces. On the other side, the remaining survivors manage to escape from the area and eventually runs into a small river that they have to cross. Before the people can make it to the other side, they're quickly attacked by a crocodile that stuns everyone in fear. The boyfriend tries to attack the animal but appears to have forgotten how to walk, and giving the creature a perfect chance to devour him. Luckily, the man is rescued by Hao in the last moment, while the animal roars furiously at the people. The crocodile charges towards the main character right away, but Hao is able to dodge the attack while the creature drops into the water and eventually leaving as a result. The main character goes towards the others as he reunites with his daughter, and they finally embrace each other while the father promises that everything will be okay from now on. At the same time, the girl with the sticky liquids has finally found a source of fresh water alongside Fang. They quickly begin quenching their thirst, while the girl starts washing herself like she's in one of those Japanese movies not made for children. While trying her best to look delicious for the audiences, the girl suddenly hears a splash from behind her and realizes that they're not alone inside the water. Before the woman can get out, she's quickly confronted by Fang, who wants to have some aggressive cuddling inside the lake. However, he's immediately rejected by the girl, which eventually gives him performance issues as a result. Just when the two are about to get out, the woman feels something inside the water as the crocodile grabs onto her and causing her to drag onto the man as well. This causes Fang to kick the girl repeatedly like she's full of diseases, and allowing the woman to be quickly devoured by the massive reptile. On the other side, the survivors continue venturing across the forest, and to their surprise, the people are able to find a crashed airplane that likely belonged to the dead soldiers. They try to look for any working equipment that they can use, eventually finding a machine gun and a radio that's still functional. Lin takes the chance and calls for help immediately, and finally giving the people some hope that they can still survive this journey. Everyone decides to head towards the beach immediately, but they quickly run into another survivor who turns out to be Fang. Although the people obviously don't trust the man, they have no choice but to let him tag along, as Hao warns Fang to stay away from his daughter. The group eventually makes it towards a large river that they have to cross once again, but the pregnant woman is not able to swim in her condition. The team is forced to help the wife build a simple raft, as Hao volunteers to swim across the water so that he can pull her across the river. The main character is eventually able to make it towards the other side, as all the survivors begin swimming across the water as well. Everything seems to be going according to plan, but Hao quickly realizes that something is terribly wrong as the giant crocodile appears onto the surface. The people begin to panic as they swim desperately for their lives, while the massive creature continues charging towards them. Lin is able to make it across with her boyfriend, while Fan begins swimming the other way, but the husband is still inside the water as he tries to push the wife across the river. Seeing that they have no chance to escape, the husband pushes the woman away as he sacrifices himself right in front of everyone and gets devoured by the giant creature. This causes Jia to scream in tears while the crocodile turns around to prey on the humans once again. Hao begins shooting the machine gun at the creature and giving the others a chance to run, while the animal chases them closely behind. The people are able to make it into a clearing as Hao tries holding the monster back by using his gun, but is forced to jump away in the last moment. The giant reptile continues chasing the others as they split into groups, but Fan eventually falls down as he begins having performance issues once again. Lin sees this and runs back immediately to help the man, but Fan only uses the chance to throw the girl towards the crocodile and leaving her to die. This causes the monster to chase after the girl as it approaches Lin from behind and planning to devour its victim. Luckily, Hao is able to distract the creature just in time by shooting continuously at the beast while getting the animal's attention and allowing his daughter to run away. The barrage of bullets are able to eventually damage the monster by piercing his skin, but accidentally hits Fang as well and paralyzing his legs. The creature sees the injured man and rushes towards him immediately, but also manages to grab onto Lin by using his tail. The monster approaches from behind the human, but Fang suddenly gets a heart attack from all the stress, which causes him to fall onto the ground. This allows the creature to charge in and swallows the human right away, as Hao follows the monster to rescue his daughter. Very soon, the knife falls upon the lens, and the man is eventually able to track the creature into a cave, where he rushes in alongside the remaining survivors. They carefully tread into the large tunnel and soon realizes that the giant crocodile is sleeping beside the rocks. Chan tells the woman to go back to the entrance, but before Jia is able to leave, she quickly sees the body of her husband, which causes her to fall into tears. This puts the people's lives in danger as it nearly wakes up the giant monster, but luckily the woman is able to calm down just in time. Hao continues moving forwards to look for his daughter as they carefully avoid the massive animal, and the father is eventually able to find the girl, who's amazingly still alive. The man tries to get his daughter out immediately, but before they can leave the area, Chan notices that the creature has disappeared and realizes that it's right behind him. Hao sees that they're in serious trouble as the young man is frozen like a statue from the fear, giving the main character no other choice but to fire at the monster to save everyone else. The boyfriend takes the chance and rushes towards Lin while carrying the girl away from the cave as they try to escape from the area. The monster eventually turns towards Hao as the man rushes deeper into the unknown while luring the animal away. The father tries turning into the corners and hiding inside the smaller tunnels to lose the massive creature, while Chan is able to bring his girlfriend towards the entrance. He hands Lin over to Jia and immediately decides to go back to help as he rushes towards the monster while holding his weapons. At the same time, the main character is running out of places to hide as the creature nearly kills the man from behind. This forces Hao to run desperately for his life and eventually jumping into a small entrance while shooting continuously at the giant crocodile. However, the bullets are not very effective as the man quickly runs out of ammo at the worst time, and he realizes that he dropped his grenade right behind the massive creature. Chan eventually makes it back to help as well, and the father tells the young man to find the grenade immediately before the monster can break inside. Chan rushes towards the rocks as he looks for the weapon like a madman, but is quickly able to find the bomb. He runs towards the animal immediately and throws the axe towards the creature, while getting the monster's attention and luring it away. This gives Hao a chance to escape as the young man is chased by the massive beast, but Chan quickly unpins the grenade and throws it towards the monster. This unleashes a huge explosion that shakes the entire cave and causing tremendous damage towards the giant creature, which apparently kills it as a result. Hao sees this and goes back towards the opening, while finally giving his approval towards the young man for being so courageous. However, before the people can leave, they quickly realize that the animal is still alive. This causes Hao to grab the knife and roll down into the rocks, while the crocodile rushes towards the man and getting sliced open from underneath. The attack eventually kills the giant monster as it falls down for the last time, and Chan rushes over immediately to pull out his friend from under the creature. Luckily, Hao was able to survive the battle, which allows them to leave the cave in one piece as they're finally reunited with the others. The survivors are eventually able to leave the dangerous forest as they head towards the beach while the sun is rising, and numerous helicopters can be seen heading for their rescue. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like my videos, please cross like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.
This is the police. This is the police. The scoops are on their way.
New York, 2022. The mindless activities of humanity have led to environmental pollution and global warming, complicating life for mankind. The polluted atmosphere has destroyed nearly all natural wildlife, leaving people to fend for themselves. Natural foods are scarce, and people survive on concentrates produced by the large corporation, Soylent. Their latest product, Soylent Green, is made from plankton and promises to feed everyone. However, it is currently produced in insufficient quantities. New York police detective Frank Thorne lives with his old friend, former police analyst Solomon Sol Roth, who has an excellent memory and serves as a kind of archive for Thorne. Moreover, he has preserved a police reference library to help his friend with investigations. This day begins with a conversation about a recent murder. Sol grumbles that Thorne expects too much from his notes. This isn't the Congressional Archive. Meanwhile, the power goes out. Sol reminisces about the old days when food was real and electricity worked without interruption. But people ruin nature and now everything is dying. The man sits on a bicycle which generates energy for the apartment, while Thorne heads to work, stepping over the bodies of homeless people sleeping right on the staircase of his building. The streets are clogged with old cars that, due to a lack of fuel, now serve as homes for the poor or as venues for criminal meetings. In one of these cars, a young man named Gilbert receives a metal meat hook and instructions for an upcoming job from a criminal world representative. Meanwhile, in the apartment of the wealthy William Simonson, his girlfriend Shirley plays on a machine gifted to her. She is very pleased with a successful move and thanks her master when the security guard Fielding arrives to remind the girl that it's time to go. The couple heads to a store where the vendor sells them expensive products and shows them an item completely unattainable for ordinary people, a beef tenderloin. At this time, Gilbert uses the hook to infiltrate the residential complex for the privileged and ascends the Simonsons' apartment. Seeing the young man, the wealthy man remains completely calm, making no attempt to flee or call for security. Gilbert apologizes and explains that those who sent him can no longer rely on Simonson's silence. The wealthy man agrees with all his arguments and calmly confirms that what Gilbert is about to do is necessary for God. The young man raises the metal hook and strikes Simonson on the head. Sometime later, Thorne arrives at the deceased's home to investigate the case. He questions the caretaker, who assures him that the cameras malfunctioned, and leads the detective to the apartment where Shirley meets him. Ignoring her, Thorne examines the body of the deceased. Searching the apartment for clues, Thorne finds and consumes whiskey, beef, and other foods unavailable to him. Fielding talks about the shopping trip, and the policeman enjoys washing his hands in clean, warm water. He then collects the found papers, some pleasant items like toiletries, and the food into a separate bag, taken from Simonson's bedroom. Meanwhile, Shirley is distraught, thinking that if she hadn't left, Simonson would still be alive. But Fielding refutes her certainty, saying that she likely would have died too. Later, Thorne interrogates the girl, examining her hands. He doesn't fully believe in her sincerity, but Shirley assures him that she wouldn't risk her job. The fact is, she belongs to this apartment, like furniture. Now she will wait for the new tenant if he wants to keep her. At this time, Thorne is informed about the arrival of the sanitation crew. He orders them to take Simonson to the dump, but the crew reports that the wealthy man will be sent to the incineration plant. Shirley is saddened by this outcome, as she still remembers her grandmother's proper funeral. Thorne takes the bag of items and leaves. He returns to the apartment, stepping over the bodies of the homeless, and hands Saul gifts he hasn't seen in a long time: clean paper, soap, and pencils. He also lays out a classified Soylent report related to oceanography found in the deceased's apartment. Saul is overjoyed to see vegetables and cries at the sight of meat. The next day, Thorne goes to work. His boss, Lieutenant Hatcher, is unhappy that the case is still unsolved, but the policeman is convinced that the murder was a contract killing. Nothing was stolen from the apartment, there was no security, and the killer used a meat hook instead of a weapon to simulate a simple robbery. Therefore, the first thing the detective decides to do is check the bodyguard, and after tracking the man, he finds his girlfriend, Marta's apartment. Thorne searches the place, notices a spoon on the table stained with strawberry jam, and concludes that this is too luxurious an item for the bodyguard's girlfriend. Returning home, he sits down for dinner, prepared by Saul from the products he brought the day before. The friends savor long-forgotten tastes, and then Saul gets to the report. Studying the books brought by Thorne, he learned about Simonson's biography and his longtime partner Santini, who now serves as the governor of New York. Together they created the Soylent Project, which became very profitable for its developers. Thorne goes to the phone booth on the corner and reports to the lieutenant what he has learned, unaware that the person who gave Gilbert the meat hook is in his office. Meanwhile, a party is taking place in Simonson's apartment, organized by Shirley. Thorne arrives and demands answers to his questions. Shirley can't say anything specific, as Simonson didn't confide in her. However, she does know Santini. Simonson introduced her to him. In fact, Simonson had been acting strangely in recent months, worried and even visiting church. The couple retreats to the bedroom when the building manager bursts into the hall. He behaves very rudely with the girls, and Thorne declares that he asked them to gather to ask questions. The manager is forced to back off, but the upset girls leave. Shirley offers Thorne to stay the night, take a real bath, and enjoy breakfast. She doesn't like being alone and is happy with the man she likes, as the others don't ask her opinion. Thorne agrees to the invitation. The couple takes a shower together, enjoying amenities unavailable to ordinary mortals. Later, Thorne visits the church where the deceased wealthy man had gone. On the porch, he finds a dead woman with a child tied to her hand. Realizing that the mother can no longer care for her daughter, he takes the child and carries her into the church, but the building is crowded with people who have nowhere else to go. Finding the priest to whom Simonson confessed, Thorne tries to question him. However, exhausted by the huge, sick, and hungry flock, the priest only remembers the fact of the wealthy man's confession, not its details. Yet, under pressure from the policeman, he admits that the truth is killing him. It's so monstrous. Thorne returns to the lieutenant, who informs him that the Simonson case is closed, as it's a simple robbery. He asks to rewrite the report, but Thorne refuses to do so, finding everything too suspicious. For refusing to obey, Hatcher assigns Thorne to patrol the streets. That same day, Governor Santini is informed about the persistent policeman who refuses to close the case. Learning about Thorne's visit to the priest, Santini orders his elimination. Fielding goes to confession. Meanwhile, Thorne is patrolling the street where the Soylent distribution center is located. A large crowd gathers, and soon the product runs out, causing discontent among the crowd. The police recognize the danger and try to quell the unrest. However, people start rioting. The killer sent after Thorne tries to get close to him as machines with scoops arrive to load people into the truck beds and take them for processing. The killer shoots but misses, killing a woman standing next to the policeman. The crowd goes wild. The killer tries to reach Thorne, injuring several rioters and wounding the policeman in the leg. Thorne tries to capture him, but seeing the weapon, pushes the guy. He flies straight under the scoop of a machine and dies, depriving the policeman of the opportunity to question him and learn the truth. Nevertheless, convinced of Fielding's involvement in the conspiracy against him, Thorne sets up an ambush in the bodyguard's girlfriend Marta's apartment. The men fight, during which Thorne accuses the bodyguard of killing his boss and implicating the corporation in the attack on the policeman. Finally, he warns the man to stop following him, otherwise it will end very badly. After this, Thorne goes to Shirley. At this time, Solomon brings the oceanographic report to a group of scientists who call themselves the Investigators Bureau. Shirley has just finished bandaging Thorne and offers to go somewhere, but he doesn't know where they could run. Everywhere it's the same, hunger and a dying earth. The girl is upset as the new tenant is arriving today, but the policeman is sure she will please him. Meanwhile, the scientists announce the results of their research to Saul, and it is truly horrifying. Simonson, being a member of the Soylent Board, learned everything, and his psyche couldn't handle it. The corporation realized they couldn't rely on him. To prevent him from talking, they eliminated him. Now, before going to the Supreme Council, they need to gather evidence. Saul is so shocked by the discovery that he decides to go to the place where they will help him die. Meanwhile, a new owner moves into Simonson's apartment. He meets Shirley and finds her attractive. That evening, Saul goes to the place, notifying Thorne in a note. The policeman immediately rushes to his friend. Saul is just answering the manager's questions. His favorite color is orange, and his favorite music is classical. The man is escorted to a private room where two young people help the old man undress. He is laid on a couch, classical music begins to play, and scenes of nature that no longer exist. Vanished forests, extinct wild animals, lost rivers, and the beauty of the ocean appear on a huge screen. At this time, Thorne arrives at the house of the Lord, and they guide him to Saul's room, but the doors are already closed, and entering is impossible. The detective can only watch his friend's last moments through a viewing window. He watches the beautiful scenes with Saul, marveling at the lost beauty of nature. But Saul notices him and is happy to be able to say goodbye to his friend. Before dying, he tells him about his discovery and begs his friend to find the evidence and reveal the truth. After waiting for the end, Thorne follows the stretcher, carrying his friend's body. The man manages to sneak into the basement, where the bodies are loaded into large trucks, and he climbs onto one of them. Soon the truck arrives at the center for processing human bodies, and Thorne watches as the bags are unloaded and sent inside the factories. The man goes inside and soon finds a conveyor belt that lowers the bodies to a lower level. Thorne follows them, and after tracking the process, the man realizes that Soylent Green is made from processed human bodies. However, the guards spot him, and the policeman has to flee, killing several guards trying to detain him along the way. He soon reaches the city and tries to contact his precinct, but the line is busy. Then Thorne calls Shirley's apartment and asks the girl to stay with the new tenant and just live. Finally, Hatcher responds, annoyed by his subordinate's actions, but Thorne doesn't have time to say anything before he is attacked by the corporation's men, led by Fielding. The man fires back and runs to the church, though he is wounded. However, Fielding rushes after him. He searches for the policeman among the people filling the church, notices blood drops, and follows them, but Thorne attacks first. A fight ensues, people wake up and scream, but the policeman manages to kill his enemy with a knife picked up from the floor. At this moment, Hatcher arrives. Thorne tells him what he has learned and urges him to tell the Bureau members that the ocean is dying, and the plankton from which everyone thinks Soylent Green is made no longer exists. Soylent Green is made from people. So the corporation is intentionally breeding people like livestock. The lieutenant promises to take the necessary measures. Thorne is taken away by paramedics, but the man continues to shout that Soylent is made from people and asks the lieutenant to stop it. The final scenes replay the images shown to the dying Solomon Roth. The adaptation of Harry Harrison's novel turned out to be terrifyingly beautiful and compelling. The most frightening thing is that there is no resolution, nor can there be. Even if people learn the truth, what will change? And the focus of the plot on ordinary people conveys the fragility and insignificance of human lives, which remains unchanged throughout all times.
Hello everyone, today we'll be talking about a science fiction film called Crocodile Island. Be ready for some spoilers ahead. In the year of 1945, a couple of soldiers are flying home after winning the Second World War, but they quickly realize that something is wrong as they head inside the Bermuda Triangle. Very soon, all their equipments begin to malfunction as they see numerous giant creatures flying their way and crashing into their airplanes. The men are forced to jump out immediately and use their parachutes to break the fall just in time. When one of the soldiers finally makes it onto the island, he quickly realizes that they're not alone alone as he watches his friend. A massive crocodile jumps out from the water and devours the other pilot in a single bite, before leaving the soldiers stranded on the island that's filled by monsters. Many years later, a commercial airplane is also passing by the Bermuda Triangle, but the passengers are completely oblivious about the dangers that they're in. The main character, Hao, is a single father who's traveling along with his teenage daughter, Lin, and is obviously unhappy about her new boyfriend whose name is Chan. The father demands to know how long they have been together, but is only responded by resentment from his daughter, giving him no other choice but to stare at the boyfriend in anger. Before their argument continue, the entire plane begins to shake violently and causing all the passengers to panic in fear as they try to put on the oxygen masks. Things become even worse as the pilots realize that their equipments are failing, giving them no other choice but to slowly bring down the airplane towards the nearby island. Before the aircraft is able to reach the bottom, the people soon notice numerous gigantic birds flying their way and causing tremendous damage towards the engines. This causes the airplane to quickly drop towards the ocean, while the pilots try desperately to maintain control, but the aircraft is ripped open violently. The people are sucked outside by the pressure difference as Hao tries to make it towards his daughter, and eventually managing to secure himself onto the seat. The airplane crashes into the water as the entire vessel is drifting on the ocean, but the pilots quickly realize that something is wrong as they're heading directly towards the rocks. The aircraft slams into the island, which breaks the plane into pieces, while the passengers are tossed away like ragdolls, which causes everyone to pass out. When Hao eventually regains consciousness, he's able to rescue his daughter and bring her onto land, where they realize that only a handful of people were able to survive. The passengers quickly find out that they're stranded on the island, giving them no other choice but to gather all the resources that they can. However, the people quickly realize that there's barely any drinkable water left, and all their phones appear to have no signals in the area. Realizing that they're not going to last very long on the beach, Hao has decided to venture into the forest where he may find more resources for the people to survive. The main character goes into the jungle alongside his daughter's boyfriend Chan, and very soon they manage to locate a small building that's surrounded by trees. The people are able to find weapons inside the shed, and most importantly, they discovered a notebook that appears to be written by a soldier from the Second World War. Luckily, one of their traveling companion is a professor who knows English, but the man quickly finds out from the journal that the island is filled by giant monsters. This causes them to head back towards the beach immediately as they try to warn their friends about the danger that they're in. On the other side, a survivor called Fan begins fighting a woman for the only bottle of drinkable water in the area. Luckily, the man's despicable actions are quickly stopped by another person called Lee, who punches the aggressor right in the face. Their fight continues onto the water as a flight attendant tries to stop the violence while no one else offers to help. Lee's pregnant wife Jia sees this and tries to stop her husband, eventually managing to pull the man away from the conflict. Before their squabble continues, the people quickly realize that something is coming their way as the flight attendant is attacked by a crocodile inside the ocean. Everyone sees this and begins running away immediately, while numerous reptiles climb onto the beach and starts devouring the humans who are too slow to escape. When Hao eventually manages to return from the forest, the people are shocked to see that everyone has left the area and leaving nothing but footprints of the crocodiles behind. Hao thinks that their friends must be still alive, which causes them to chase after the survivors immediately. At the same time, the people are continuously being pursued by the animals who devours anyone that was left behind. The survivors are eventually split into groups as they escape towards different directions, and Lin is able to make it towards a clearing alongside the husband and his pregnant wife. Very soon, they're able to find fresh water, which allows the group to recover from thirst, but Lee begins hearing noises that are coming towards them from inside the forest. Luckily, the survivors quickly realize that it's only the main character and his group, which finally allows them to reunite once again. However, before they can celebrate, the father begins noticing vibrations within the area, causing all the people to freeze in fear as as they hear the noises getting louder. What the survivors don't realize is that a giant crocodile was hiding right behind the rocks this whole time, and the creature begins to show itself as it towers over all the humans. The monster approaches the nearby victim while staring at the person in anger and causing the man's bladder to malfunction in front of everyone. The people watch helplessly as the human is swallowed by the giant creature and causing the survivors to run immediately as they try desperately to escape. The massive reptile charges furiously towards the people and jumping directly at the main character, but Hao manages to dodge the attack by the skin of his teeth. The monster quickly turns the attention towards a woman who's stuck between the rocks and devouring her into its massive jaws. The people are able to escape from the area just in time as they're able to lose the creature temporarily, and Hao brings the survivors towards the building that he found earlier. The man suggests to everyone that they should camp here for the night, while touting Chen that they need to guard the area from the hostile creatures. The next morning, while everyone is still asleep, Hao decides to gather some fruits for the people so that his daughter will have something to eat when she wakes up. On the other side, Fang was able to survive alongside a woman whose name is Li Qi, but she seems to care more about getting famous than not becoming the monster's buffet. The girl quickly shows that she's nothing but dead weight, as she managed to cover herself inside a bunch of sticky liquids. Li Qi demands that Fang help her clean off the fluids immediately, but the man seems to prefer the dirty look more than anything else. What they don't realize is that the liquids are actually from the eggs of giant spiders. At the same time, Lim finally wakes up from her slumber as she tries to go outside to look for her father, but quickly notices that they're surrounded by giant insects inside the fog. They try to wake up the others quietly so they can avoid becoming the monster's prey, and the people have no choice but to slowly walk out from the building while evading the creatures. However, their plan quickly fails when a survivor discovers a bunch of sticky liquids on his head and is immediately killed by the giant insect. The people sees this and realizes that the other monsters are moving towards them as well, which forces them to run away desperately as the creatures chase them closely behind. The commotion eventually alerts Hao, causing the man to rush back immediately after hearing the screams. The survivors continue running away from the giant spiders as they sprint across the forest, but they're quickly stopped by the massive creature who's about to devour its prey. The monster begins stabbing at the humans by using its giant legs, but luckily the professor is able to distract the creature and saving the people in the last moment. This causes the monster to chase after the man immediately as he lures the giant spider away from the others. Before the people can take a break, they quickly realize that more enemies are heading their way, forcing them to run deeper into the forest once again. The survivors try desperately to shake off the incoming enemies and eventually manages to lose the creatures while they hide inside the plants, hoping that the spiders will leave. To their surprise, the people begin hearing footsteps heading their way and soon finds out that it's the main character who notices all the monsters in the area. This causes Hao to yell towards the creatures as he tries to lure the spiders away, making all the monsters chase after him and giving the others a chance to escape. The man quickly runs back to the wood building where he finds the professor hiding there for shelter as well, but what they don't realize is that the monster is waiting to ambush them. The two tries to wait until the coast is clear, but is quickly attacked by the monster from above, while the main character tries desperately to fight for their lives. However, the professor is mortally wounded and quickly dies as a result, leaving Hao all by himself while the giant creature continues attacking him from the roof. The man is proven to be no match for the creature as he gets knocked into the walls, and the monster quickly tries dragging him back to finish the kill. Luckily, Hao is able to break free and runs away from the creature before tossing his grenade at the enemy and blowing the monster into pieces. On the other side, the remaining survivors manage to escape from the area and eventually runs into a small river that they have to cross. Before the people can make it to the other side, they're quickly attacked by a crocodile that stuns everyone in fear. The boyfriend tries to attack the animal but appears to have forgotten how to walk, and giving the creature a perfect chance to devour him. Luckily, the man is rescued by Hao in the last moment, while the animal roars furiously at the people. The crocodile charges towards the main character right away, but Hao is able to dodge the attack while the creature drops into the water and eventually leaving as a result. The main character goes towards the others as he reunites with his daughter, and they finally embrace each other while the father promises that everything will be okay from now on. At the same time, the girl with the sticky liquids has finally found a source of fresh water alongside Fang. They quickly begin quenching their thirst, while the girl starts washing herself like she's in one of those Japanese movies not made for children. While trying her best to look delicious for the audiences, the girl suddenly hears a splash from behind her and realizes that they're not alone inside the water. Before the woman can get out, she's quickly confronted by Fang, who wants to have some aggressive cuddling inside the lake. However, he's immediately rejected by the girl, which eventually gives him performance issues as a result. Just when the two are about to get out, the woman feels something inside the water as the crocodile grabs onto her and causing her to drag onto the man as well. This causes Fang to kick the girl repeatedly like she's full of diseases, and allowing the woman to be quickly devoured by the massive reptile. On the other side, the survivors continue venturing across the forest, and to their surprise, the people are able to find a crashed airplane that likely belonged to the dead soldiers. They try to look for any working equipment that they can use, eventually finding a machine gun and a radio that's still functional. Lin takes the chance and calls for help immediately, and finally giving the people some hope that they can still survive this journey. Everyone decides to head towards the beach immediately, but they quickly run into another survivor who turns out to be Fang. Although the people obviously don't trust the man, they have no choice but to let him tag along, as Hao warns Fang to stay away from his daughter. The group eventually makes it towards a large river that they have to cross once again, but the pregnant woman is not able to swim in her condition. The team is forced to help the wife build a simple raft, as Hao volunteers to swim across the water so that he can pull her across the river. The main character is eventually able to make it towards the other side, as all the survivors begin swimming across the water as well. Everything seems to be going according to plan, but Hao quickly realizes that something is terribly wrong as the giant crocodile appears onto the surface. The people begin to panic as they swim desperately for their lives, while the massive creature continues charging towards them. Lin is able to make it across with her boyfriend, while Fan begins swimming the other way, but the husband is still inside the water as he tries to push the wife across the river. Seeing that they have no chance to escape, the husband pushes the woman away as he sacrifices himself right in front of everyone and gets devoured by the giant creature. This causes Jia to scream in tears while the crocodile turns around to prey on the humans once again. Hao begins shooting the machine gun at the creature and giving the others a chance to run, while the animal chases them closely behind. The people are able to make it into a clearing as Hao tries holding the monster back by using his gun, but is forced to jump away in the last moment. The giant reptile continues chasing the others as they split into groups, but Fan eventually falls down as he begins having performance issues once again. Lin sees this and runs back immediately to help the man, but Fan only uses the chance to throw the girl towards the crocodile and leaving her to die. This causes the monster to chase after the girl as it approaches Lin from behind and planning to devour its victim. Luckily, Hao is able to distract the creature just in time by shooting continuously at the beast while getting the animal's attention and allowing his daughter to run away. The barrage of bullets are able to eventually damage the monster by piercing his skin, but accidentally hits Fang as well and paralyzing his legs. The creature sees the injured man and rushes towards him immediately, but also manages to grab onto Lin by using his tail. The monster approaches from behind the human, but Fang suddenly gets a heart attack from all the stress, which causes him to fall onto the ground. This allows the creature to charge in and swallows the human right away, as Hao follows the monster to rescue his daughter. Very soon, the night falls upon the lands, and the man is eventually able to track the creature into a cave, where he rushes in alongside the remaining survivors. tunnels. They carefully tread into the large tunnel and soon realizes that the giant crocodile is sleeping beside the rocks. Chan tells the woman to go back to the entrance, but before Jia is able to leave, she quickly sees the body of her husband, which causes her to fall into tears. This puts the people's lives in danger as it nearly wakes up the giant monster, but luckily the woman is able to calm down just in time. Hao continues moving forwards to look for his daughter as they carefully avoid the massive animal, and the father is eventually able to find the girl who's amazingly still alive. The man tries to get his daughter out immediately, but before they can leave the area, Chan notices that the creature has disappeared and realizes that it's right behind him. Hao sees that they're in serious trouble as the young man is frozen like a statue from the fear, giving the main character no other choice but to fire at the monster to save everyone else. The boyfriend takes the chance and rushes towards Lin while carrying the girl away from the cave as they try to escape from the area. The monster eventually turns towards Hao as the man rushes deeper into the unknown while luring the animal away. The father tries turning into the corners and hiding inside the smaller tunnels to lose the massive creature, while Chan is able to bring his girlfriend towards the entrance. He hands Lin over to Jia and immediately decides to go back to help as he rushes towards the monster while holding his weapons. At the same time, the main character is running out of places to hide as the creature nearly kills the man from behind. This forces Hao to run desperately for his life and eventually jumping into a small entrance while shooting continuously at the giant crocodile. However, the bullets are not very effective as the man quickly runs out of ammo at the worst time, and he realizes that he dropped his grenade right behind the massive creature. Chan eventually makes it back to help as well, and the father tells the young man to find the grenade immediately before the monster can break inside. Chan rushes towards the rocks as he looks for the weapon like a madman, but is quickly able to find the bomb. He runs towards the animal immediately and throws the axe towards the creature, while getting the monster's attention and luring it away. This gives Hao a chance to escape as the young man is chased by the massive beast, but Chan quickly unpins the grenade and throws it towards the monster. This unleashes a huge explosion that shakes the entire cave and causing tremendous damage towards the giant creature, which apparently kills it as a result. Hao sees this and goes back towards the opening, while finally giving his approval towards the young man for being so courageous. However, before the people can leave, they quickly realize that the animal is still alive. This causes Hao to grab the knife and roll down into the rocks, while the crocodile rushes towards the man and getting sliced open from underneath. The attack eventually kills the giant monster as it falls down for the last time, and Chan rushes over immediately to pull out his friend from under the creature. Luckily, Hao was able to survive the battle, which allows them to leave the cave in one piece as they're finally reunited with the others. The survivors are eventually able to leave the dangerous forest as they head towards the beach while the sun is rising, and numerous helicopters can be seen heading for their rescue. So what do you guys think about this movie? Let me know in the comments below, and if you like my videos, please cross like and subscribe for more. I'll see you guys next time.
A young man returns home and discovers on the carpet in the living room his own body. Next to it lies an envelope with the inscription, "Look at me." The initial shock is replaced by curiosity as Alex finds a flash drive in the envelope, which he immediately plugs into his computer and on the screen sees just himself. The second Alex reassures himself he is not high and has not gone insane and advises to listen carefully. Thus, it all started with men in black coming to his house. Rebecca, an employee of a private scientific research institute of advanced technologies which cooperates with the National Security Agency of the USA, has a very tempting offer for Alex. But first, Alex must sign non-disclosure agreement, for which Rebecca offers a check for a substantial amount. Having signed the papers, Alex learns the story of an American unregistered satellite which the USA did not launch. Strangely enough to admit, the satellite is allegedly from the future and contains a coded message inside. If Alex agrees, he will be put to sleep and delivered to the laboratory. The institute knows that he is practically bankrupt and lives in a house inherited from his parents. To prove the seriousness of her intentions, Rebecca immediately transfers a large sum to Alex's account, which convinces him to sign the documents. The next day, he is put in a car, given an injection, after which he falls asleep and only comes to his senses in a closed, secret place. Rebecca shows him the laboratory where the satellite is already located. And the guy starts solving the task. 5 weeks pass, but there are no results yet. Rebecca suggests Alex take a day off, but the guy does not need it. One day he is visited by a vision in which a young woman decodes the same task. After that, Alex bleeds from his nose. Later he finds the name of this woman written on the frame of the bed. Soon, Alex manages to decrypt part of the code, which contains drawings of an unknown device. Rebecca announces the end of his work and informs him that he will be taken home. Alex comes to his senses at home late at night. He feels ill, which he attributes to fatigue and stress. But after a few days, the malaise intensified, and he began to be haunted by persistent hallucinations. And one day 2 strange-looking men appear on the threshold of his house, wanting to know why he agreed to decrypt the code. Alex does not understand because decryption is just his job, which pays well. The men continue to press Alex with questions about morality. Don't the consequences of his work bother him, since the device to be created from the decrypted drawings will be the most powerful weapon in the world? Alex's head starts to hurt, and he asks the men to leave. They thank him for the answers and leave. Alex immediately feels better and sits down at the computer, but at that moment, a call comes from Rebecca, reminding him of the signed non-disclosure agreements. An indignant Alex realizes that the Institute is watching him, and when he again sits down at the computer in his house, the lights go out. Alex goes outside and suddenly sees one of the 2 men who came to him with questions on the opposite side of the street, but the man's body starts growing before his eyes. Frightened, Alex runs home and looks out the window to see the giant's hand reaching for his window. Alex extends his hand to meet it, and morning comes. Rebecca, who has arrived, finds Alex at work. He tries to explain that humanity lives in 2-dimensional space, and his recent guests are a highly developed civilization that exists not only in space but also in time. They can be in this room but earlier or later, and they can watch what is happening through some kind of window in time. Alex tries to convey to Rebecca the danger of the device they are building, which can start World War III. Then the woman informs him that she knows about his illness, a brain tumor. The guy blames the Institute, which placed him in a room with a radioactive satellite, causing a tumor to develop in his brain, and insists on stopping the construction of the device. Alex, in the present, pulls his dead body out of the house and buries it in the forest, then returns to the computer and continues to listen to the story from his future self. Alex, in the future, regrets that they did not want to listen to him because he understood that something ominous was coming. Then he remembers the woman. She is cryptographer. Alex finds her address, but Beth refuses to talk to him. Alex shouts that he is dying. He has 6 months left. After that, Beth opens the doors and informs that she has 2 years left. She also realized that it was a weapon, and the drawing supposedly came from the future. There is another person, Schieferman, who communicates with her through the computer and sends her tasks, which she solves when she feels normal. Beth starts feeling unwell, so a man takes her to the bedroom, while he goes downstairs, where it seems like he sees the girl's life in the mirrors. There she is, saying goodbye to her beloved in military uniform. There his comrades inform her of terrible news, and there she is with a handful of pills in her hand, trying to leave this life. But then his attention is captured by a message from Schieferman appearing on the computer monitor. Alex responds, but Schieferman quickly realizes that it's not Beth and disconnects. The man then grabs a pack of printed papers with tasks previously given by Schieferman. In the morning, Beth finds him on her sofa, with the papers glued together. The guy points out to her that all this are pieces of a puzzle which, when assembled, can give an answer. Schieferman clearly doesn't work at the Institute. Alex asks Beth to help stop the creation of a death machine. The girl reports that she fell ill specifically after working with the satellite. She started having hallucinations and began thinking about a message from the future. What if it's possible to contact the sender? She began to hear the voices of the dead and one day heard her own voice. She also saw aliens, though she doesn't believe in them, and asks Alex to leave. Alex goes home, where people in black are waiting for him. Rebecca orders him not to meet with Beth anymore and urges him to use the remaining time wisely. Angered, the guy sends the guests to hell, and upon entering the house discovers that all his papers with conclusions have disappeared. Meanwhile, Beth sees a bright light at her house, which makes her feel sick. The woman screams in fear and tries to hide. Alex tries to drown his thoughts in alcohol when a message from Schieferman arrives on his computer. The guy is sure that Rebecca is hiding behind this nickname, but the interlocutor denies it. At that moment, the doorbell rings. Beth is on the threshold. It turns out that Cheverman directed Beth here and sent her the blueprints of a device capable of destroying the technology from the future. The couple begins developing a virus capable of destroying the machine being created from the blueprints they decrypted through the computer. But the next morning, Rebecca bursts into Alex's house. Representatives of the Institute know about their work and are already on their way there. She gives the name of the Institute's founder and orders to go to him as soon as possible. She is Schefferman and hoped to destroy the device with their help. Then cars approach Alex's house. The couple escapes through the back exit. Rebecca is caught, given an injection, and thrown into a car. Meanwhile, all the gas burners in the kitchen are opened. In the evening, Alex and Beth arrive at scientist Miles, who immediately recognizes both of them, as he has always followed their work. The thing is, this satellite was not the only one. There was another, which orbited Earth for about 400 years. Apparently, unknown beings from the future were waiting for Earthlings to grow up, fly into space, and be able to decrypt their message. The ancient satellite also contained blueprints of a machine whose purpose was to limit the evolution of humanity within the third dimension. But when Miles announced his discovery, he was laughed at. He also developed a tumor, luckily not fatal. He is sure that aliens are capable of existing in several dimensions. They do not perceive time in a linear form as humans do. And the second device, which is now being created at the Institute, will likely provide them access to the human dimension. So far, they are like watching a videotape where humans are movie characters. With the help of the first device, they can watch this movie but cannot change what is happening. But the second will allow changing the existing reality. Miles is just beginning to understand the essence of this process, but cannot explain everything completely. After all, even the appearance of the aliens is formed by the human brain itself. And by the way, he has been in contact with a huge alien visible only to him, living in his garden for more than 30 years. Miles constantly looks at it, causing his brain to adapt and begin to see the true appearance of the humanoid. But his guests see no one. Miles is sure that the tumor in their heads is the aliens' help so that people could perceive their reality. Alex suggests simply smashing the device with a hammer, but where is the guarantee that they will not restore it in the Institute? So all data on the server needs to be erased, although no one even knows the location of the Institute. But Miles reminds that he is one of its founders, and he pulls out a map with a detailed plan of the Institute. At that moment, a loud bang is heard at the door. The couple runs away, while Miles tries to calm down the raging alien. Alex and Beth hit the road and soon find the Institute's building, where they open a hatch through which they sneak inside. There they separate to increase the chances of finding the laboratory. Alex witnesses the strange behavior of a guard who constantly returns backward and realizes that time inside the Institute is looped. Beth also falls into this loop. Realizing the futility of her attempts to go further, the girl activates the bomb. But because of the time loop, she is unable to leave the dangerous place. Alex goes into a dark room and tries to carry the bomb further when he is overtaken by an alien and literally disintegrates the man into small particles. A minute later, Alex finds himself tied to a table. Opposite him sits a humanoid. Alex thinks he has died, but the alien denies his belief. They are simply curious about the human appearance and their experience of time. Linear time for aliens is incomprehensible and tedious, a labor-intensive cycle of empty beliefs. Humans are like in a trap, forced to constantly go through the same thing. Aliens, on the other hand, exist outside of time and space. They are in every moment. Therefore, causal connection and sequence of actions for them is a mystery. What will happen if a human no longer has to wait for something? Alex realizes humans will become similar to the appearance of aliens, but the familiar personality, the ego, dies in the moment. The alien is surprised. Death is natural, but man hides and distances himself from it. Time determines everything for a human. It is both a giver and a thief. A human sees the world as he imagined it, and what will happen when the source of projection disappears. Even with the eternity of self-analysis, man will not understand the difference between reality and illusion. With each newly born, a new reality comes. Therefore, a person always stands before choice. Alex feels very bad, and then the alien offers to return to the moment before the guy got sick, with the information he now has. Alex decides that he would not have gone to work at the Institute and would have stopped all this. The alien is surprised. Why would he change his behavior if he's not able to change the situation? And then Alex admits, people do not choose what will happen. The humanoid insists, will his return to the past make a difference? Can something change? And immediately, the guy finds himself in his home, in front of the computer. He records this flash drive, realizing that nothing can be changed. The world may disappear tomorrow, but this is not news. Everything has already happened. Everything ended before it began. He puts the flash drive in an envelope and falls to the floor. The last words on the flash drive are about Alex in the past, warning Beth, and he drives to the girl's house, while Alex from the future, in his last words, asks to forget about everything and live on. Quite an interesting movie that makes you think, what if the concept of time really does not exist, and we live only here and now in one single moment? Who made us believe that there is a past and a future? And is it true that a person does foolish things, not thinking about how his thoughts and actions change his own future? Friends, write your opinion in the comments.
A spacecraft is departing from Earth with another group of settlers headed for Mars. One of the passengers convinces her daughter to wave goodbye to the planet as they will be apart for a very long time. The well-established route consists of 2 stages. The shuttle docks with the Aniara, a huge spaceship that has everything for comfortable living. And after 3 weeks, it delivers the passengers to the colonized planet. A young woman named Emily Grant on the ship serves as a mimerobe, a guide to the world of Mima, the system that allows one to delve into their memories and visions so that the brain does not get bored with the repetitive space scenery. Emily herself loves to remember her walks in the forest, and the visions even allow her to feel her bare feet stepping on the moss. A new neighbor is added to Emily's room, an adult female astronomer. From the huge monitors, the astronomer tells the passengers about the delights of Aniara and that the ship has everything to keep from getting bored. Shopping centers, restaurants, and even nightclubs. If desired during the journey, one can work in the water purification department or the seaweed factory, which is necessary for oxygen production. The company pays points which serve as currency for this work. Emily gathers another group for Mima sessions. In the visualization room, there is silence as the mimerobe lays people down on the floor, face down on a special pillow, and launches the system. The glowing screen shimmers with different colors, not showing any pictures. But if the mimerobe needs to know the visions of a specific visitor, she uses a special remote control. Suddenly, an emergency situation occurs on the ship, and the whole group slides to the corner of the room. The passengers exit their cabins in panic to find out what happened. They gather in a large hall where the captain is supposed to make a live broadcast. After gathering his strength, the man makes an announcement. There has been a system failure on the Aniara, and the ship has lost all fuel and drifted off course. The crew believes that it's not a big deal and that by using the gravity of celestial bodies, they will be able to return to Earth. However, the journey will now take a little over 2 years instead of the promised 3 weeks. The outraged passengers disagree with this plan, worrying about their plans without even realizing what lies ahead. Austerity measures are introduced on the ship, but the crew realizes that the supplies will not be enough in any case. At best, there is only enough food for a couple of months. One of the crew members suggests growing algae more actively, which will help them survive. The first 3 weeks of confinement in space pass. The people still don't lose their optimism, but they're already starting to get bored. The Mima becomes the most popular hole as everyone wants to see more than just the infinite universe outside the window, and Emily can't handle it, so she asks the captain for help. In addition, the girl is going through a personal drama, hoping to resume her relationship with one of the crew members, Isabel. Emily asks her neighbor how long it would take to reach the nearest celestial body so that the ship can turn around. The woman initially avoids answering, but then admits that in her opinion all of this is hopeless. There are no points that could help them. The crew just doesn't know how to tell the passengers about it. After hearing this, the mimerobe has a panic attack and runs to her hole to immerse herself in memories of Earth, and also to drink in secret so that the commander would know. That journey has been going on for 3 years already. The people have settled into life on the ship, having come to terms with the length of the flight. Emily goes to a party where she meets Daisy and they decide to alleviate their loneliness together. When the couple retreats to a corridor, Isabel walks by and gives Daisy a cold glance, making it impossible for her to relax. There aren't enough people on the ship to work with the algae and water purification systems. Even young passengers are now being recruited, but the systems can't keep up, and all the drinks have an unpleasant sulfide smell. Strange things also start happening in the ship's hull as the system malfunctions, and Mima, using human language, begs to stop as it can no longer handle passing through people's memories. One of the people lying on the floor starts thrashing around in hysteria, and when Emily connects her remote to him, she sees very unpleasant images in his head. The Mimarobe turns to the ship's captain, asking him to let the system rest, but he believes that this is the passenger's only outlet and denies her request. Furthermore, he reprimands the girl for driving customers out of the session. During the next session, Mima repeats its words, and at some point the laser screen begins to crumble, finally stopping the system's operation. The customers are dissatisfied and blame the Mimarobe entirely. The people gather at the door to the hall to hold a memorial for Mima, and the management accuses Emily of what happened. They catch the girl and punish her severely, after which they imprison her along with Isabel, who tried to defend her friend before the management. On the ship, a series of nervous breakdowns with fatal consequences begins, and the commander has no choice but to release everyone who is under guard to take up workstations. Dead bodies are sent into open space as the ship is not equipped to store them. Isabel is sent to work in the logistics department, and Emily returns to teaching, this time with the task of educating the children on board, focusing on space sciences that could help them with their return. During their time in confinement, the Mimarobe and Isabel developed a relationship, so they move in together once they're free. Communities and groups emerge on the ship, each praying in their own way for a return and rescue. At one of the gatherings of a cult-like group, they invite the girls, as Emily was associated with Mima. In a dark room, the friends first become witnesses and then participants in love games, after which Isabel becomes pregnant. The girl falls into depression, fearing that her indulgence will bring another hostage into the situation, but Emily supports her with all her might. She even plans to make a light screen that would replace the dark picture outside the window with earthly landscapes, but the captain forbids wasting resources on such foolishness. The couple has a healthy boy who grows very quickly, but Isabel can't shake the feeling that she shouldn't have done it. While bathing with his son in the pool, she almost commits a terrible act, but fortunately she's distracted by a message from the captain, who urgently invites his former assistant to a meeting. It becomes revealed that after 6 years of travel, a flying machine has finally been detected, and a meeting with it will take place in about a year. Isabel measures the approximate size of the object and understands that it is unlikely to be a rescue ship, but everyone hopes that they will be able to obtain fuel from it to return to their route. Emily comes to the team to be with her girlfriend at such an important moment. The captain joyfully announces the discovery to the passengers, hoping to boost their morale, which he manages to do. To celebrate the occasion, a party is held on the ship, complete with drinks and leftover delicious food. As usual, the commander tries to present himself in the best light by claiming credit for the team's achievements. Throughout the year, everyone diligently trains to release probes and dock, and by the appointed time, everyone is fully prepared for the operation. The docking operation goes perfectly, and the giant space probe is placed in the ship's cargo hold for examination to determine if it contains any fuel and how radioactive it has become during its time in space. The son of Emily and Isabel is growing up, and the couple now has hope that he will see Earth. Due to a lack of peers, the boy is not developing well and hardly speaks. It is not possible to determine the chemical composition of the object because the study methods on the ship are outdated, but work is constantly being done. The captain declares that he does not consider it a mistake to give people hope, as it has brought stability to many. The roommate of Emily gets drunk at the bar and becomes too candid, causing panic to break out on the ship again. The captain takes notice of this and gets rid of the troublemaker at the first opportunity, even sending her body into open space but allowing for a memorial service for Emily. After taking an exhilarating pill, Emily goes to the bar where she meets Daisy and his friends again. The group has a fun time, but another accident occurs on the ship. An unknown object explodes and damages the equipment. Those who were working on the probe in the cargo hold at the time are lost forever. Upon inspection of the damage, the captain orders them to be disposed of while saving any useful clothing. Meanwhile, the Mimorobe returns home and asks Isabel for forgiveness, and it seems that everything is returning to a peaceful state. However, during the conversation, Emily realizes that her friend has developed mental disorders. After putting her son to bed, Emily shares her achievements at work with Isabel. The two women have a nice chat, and Emily is not worried about anything. Wishing her friend a good night, Emily leaves to finally connect the light screen she has long dreamed of creating. Everything works perfectly, and the remaining passengers on the ship marvel at the earthly landscapes with waterfalls and forests outside the window. As she listens to the words of gratitude, Emily plans to create new pictures. Emily runs to her cabin to hear the opinion of her family. She opens the door with the key, but it doesn't budge. Emily tries to fix the lock several times, but then realizes that something is blocking it from the inside. With effort, she finds a belt from a rope on the door handle, and Isabel is nearby. Coming to her senses a few seconds later, Emily runs to her son's room, but there she's met with a terrible sight. It's the 10th year of the journey. The captain gathers the few remaining passengers in the main hall and presents Emily with an award for creating the light screen. As she receives the medal from the commander, the young woman notices traces of a nervous breakdown on his wrist. Giving a speech, the captain tries to appear heroic in this situation and suggested they should be proud that they have gone farther than anyone has gone before. On the 24th year of the journey, only a few people remain alive. Old and wrinkled Emily leads a meeting of the survivors where they pray for strength to be sent to them. The ship has long been powerless and is floating in space like a piece of space junk. And almost 6 million years later, the spacecraft Aniara approaches an unknown planet in the constellation of Lyra.
An alien race from the depths of space colonizes Earth. Millions of people from around the world are sent to work in mines on other planets. Those left on Earth are controlled with implanted tracking chips and giant alien robots positioned around the perimeters of cities.
Oh wow, you hear me? Ah!
Chicago, 2019. The city is under martial law due to a massive alien attack on all major cities of the world. The Drummond family, a father, a mother, and their 2 sons, tries to leave the city, but all exits are blocked. When a police officer stops their car at one of the exits, the father presses the gas pedal and breaks through the blockade. Entering an exit tunnel, the man is forced to stop as the exit is blocked by aliens. Taken by surprise, the father freezes, although his wife asks him to turn around. Suddenly, an unknown pulse tears through both adults sitting in the front seats. The children, looking up, see an incomprehensible creature standing right in front of their car's hood. 9 years later, the world, having surrendered without a fight to the invaders, is completely under their control. The operation of vital productions, including power plants, has been restored everywhere. The aliens are called legislators because all laws and rules now come from them. Over the years since Earth's surrender, the aliens have forced humans to build suitable living spaces for them underground, called closed zones, where only high-ranking human officials are allowed entry. It became clear that the alien invasion aimed at Earth's resources, their extraction, and exportation led to huge social stratification. The rich, working for the aliens, continue to live well, while the poor have lost all guarantees, including education and healthcare. Police lawlessness thrives, and the deportation of all undesirable people from the planet has begun. The alien systems block all communication lines, so people know nothing about the life of other cities and countries. Amidst this wave, a resistance emerged, planning an attack on the closed zone in Chicago. But the plan failed, the zone was unharmed, and the fate of the rebels remains unknown, although the police assure that they were all eliminated. And this was supposed to be the first spark from which a flame would ignite. 9 years after the failed uprising in Chicago, the police monitor anyone who raises even the slightest suspicion. Detective William Mulligan reviews video recordings from Gabriel's apartment, whose brother Rafe died in the uprising and was posthumously named a hero of the resistance. The guy goes through his usual morning routines, then wakes up his girlfriend, showing her a photo taken on the other side of the lake, where visiting is now prohibited. But the girl does not want to believe in a change in their lives and asks not to invent the impossible. Gabe leaves the house where his friend, who has obtained and repaired a boat, is already waiting for him, so they can sail out of the city tonight. But Gabe reminds him that he is under round-the-clock surveillance. Meanwhile, Mulligan reviews the newspapers and sees an advertisement for the Phoenix fire suppression system, after which he goes to his old friend Jane, who now runs a brothel. At the entrance, he sees the Phoenix emblem on the wall and notices the police chief. The owner greets Mulligan as a good friend and hands him a gift box, mentioning the Donnans and their gifts. Returning to the police station, he shares his findings. Phoenix exists and is preparing something for the New World Masters, but his partner does not believe that anyone could have survived the last purge. At this time in the subway, two resistance members meet because the newspaper advertisement is a battle readiness order given by their leader, whom they call First. He has learned that there is an entrance to the zone through the stadium, and soon there will be a Unity Festival, which high-ranking aliens will attend. The only thing left is to infiltrate. The next day, Gabe goes to work, having passed through the recognition system, since every person now has an identifier chip inside. The guy works in a data restoration center where he views millions of private videos a day and checks browser history requests. He sends all the collected information to the Central Information Center and destroys the carriers. Later, he receives a cigarette containing an unknown substance from his colleague and hides it behind his ear. After work, Gabe exits to the outside with a crowd of other workers and sees arriving guards grab and lead away one of the women. At the same time, an alien transport ship is sending off another batch of people as slaves for the alien mines from Earth. And around the perimeter of the city stand giant alien robots to prevent people from escaping. Gabe goes to the boat but is horrified at the sight of the weapon in his friend's hands. If they get caught, they will be instantly destroyed. Their scuffle is interrupted by the appearance of Mulligan, who orders Gabe to get into his car. He reminds the boy that he was his father's partner and now asks not to repeat his brother's mistakes and make the right choice. Gabriel has no information about Phoenix, and he does not intend to snitch, so the conversation goes nowhere. Gabriel goes to the person he is supposed to sell the acquired cigarette to, but the potential client pushes the boy into his van and, putting on them special collars that jam the tracking chip signal, drives him to the center of a destroyed district, where in one of the surviving buildings, Gabe meets his living brother. After a joyful reunion, Rafe tells him that he is the only survivor from his group. Unknown to him, Craftsman removed his chip, and now he has joined a new group. He takes the cigarette and, giving his brother a large sum of money, orders him to leave the area because Phoenix plans to attack the invaders. The brothers argue about the necessity of the uprising, but Rafe is sure that as long as there is time to fight, they should fight. Gabriel then rushes into his apartment and hurriedly starts packing, convincing his girlfriend to join him. The girl tries to persuade the boy to stay, and seeing the money and learning that Rafe is alive, asks the boy to think carefully, as they could then be recorded as accomplices. The couple argues, unaware that the police are closely listening to their conversation. Gabe leaves alone, but immediately encounters Mulligan, who was following him. Gabriel runs away from Mulligan and hides in the secret passages underground. He puts on the remaining collar, and the aliens' drones do not lose sight of him. Mulligan returns to the station, where he has an entire room dedicated to Phoenix, and notes that Rafe might be alive. At this time, Rafe's carrier pigeon reaches the recipient, and the information is passed along the chain to a secret IP center, where upon entering the received numbers, its worker displays Phoenix's target, an official who will gain access to the closed zone that day. The newspapers immediately publish Phoenix's announcement, and the group members receive the call. One of them, working on the radio, plays a conditional track heard by a man with a dog, who immediately takes her for a walk. Her bark is heard by a mechanic girl who rushes to her car. Later, they arrive at an underground clinic where a doctor performs complex operations to remove the tracking chips. Then, he hands over the chips extracted from law-abiding citizens previously deceased from diseases, as well as special containers that need to be kept in the mouth, so they too will be recognized as law-abiding citizens. Meanwhile, one of the resistance members, serving as a priest, meets with Rafe. The pair goes to an arms dealer and receives invisible explosive material from a girl extracted from a crashed alien ship. If attached to an organic carrier's skin or hair, scanners will not be able to detect it. Later, the resistance group gathers together. The leader distributes containers with new chips and shows a photo of the person who will go to the aliens. Lastly, he hands out poison capsules to everyone, which will help avoid being captured alive by the enemy. The group freely enters the festival and attaches the invisible alien explosive device to an official. He goes to the arriving aliens and explodes with them. The city is immediately locked down, and the police block the streets to find the attackers. The priest is the first to die, caught in gunfire. Rafe is caught by one of the aliens and tries to escape from it, hiding in a van. This is seen by the guy's comrades, who come to his rescue and destroy the alien. The surviving rebels try to escape from the city, while the aliens bring in hunter warriors from another world, and they quickly track down Rafe and his accomplices. Enraged, the legislators prepare to destroy the district where, according to their information, the resistance is based. Mulligan tries to persuade the police chief, who is heading to report to the aliens, not to allow this because he needs time to catch the suspects. But he is reminded that the decision is made and his search interests no one. Raids begin in the city, during one of which Gabe is captured, while his brother and two of his comrades reach the station and board buses 2 minutes before the expiration of the chips from law-abiding citizens. But when it seems they have managed to escape, the buses are stopped by the hunters. Realizing his capture is inevitable, one of the group takes the poison capsule. The mechanic girl attacks a hunter and is instantly vaporized. Rafe tries to run but is captured and brought to the police, where his brother is being interrogated at the same time. Mulligan shows him how Rafe is tortured to make him talk about Phoenix and give up first. Gabe learns that the city is preparing for destruction and agrees to send a message to the leader. He is brought to the surviving members of the resistance, and hearing that the guy allegedly knows ways into the zone, they agree to connect him with First. Gabe is brought to Jane Doe, who is number 1 in the leader of the resistance in the city. Upon seeing the boy, the woman calls him by name, which confuses Gabrielle, and at that moment, a police squad raids the brothel and kills Jane. The investigation reveals that Jane had installed listening devices to record conversations with police officers she served to gather secret information. Later, during a briefing with the aliens, Mulligan names the members of Phoenix who, learning about the death of First, voluntarily left this life. Before the invasion, Jane was a history teacher and changed her profession to gather secret information. Mulligan presents recordings obtained in the brothel, where it is heard that the police chief actively leaked secret information about the aliens. Captured resistance members are deported to alien mines, and Mulligan, having declared the neutralization of the Chicago threat, is appointed acting commissioner. Later, he meets with Gabe and puzzles the boy with a new thought. What if the failure of the uprising was planned? And he hands the boy a memory card, extracted from a phone once given to him by Jane. The next day, Gabe views its contents, a video dedicated to a party before his birth, where close family friends record messages for him. There, he sees both Mulligan and Jane Doe, who was acquainted with his mother, as well as some other members of Phoenix. Meanwhile, Mulligan is allowed to arrive at the Earth Control Center and meet with the legislators in their habitat. As he heads to the spaceship, the same invisible substance that was part of the explosive used in the stadium attack manifests on him, explaining that Mulligan is also part of the resistance, and the plan was organized so that he could infiltrate the main alien base and set off an explosion. During the credits, a map shows that the plan worked, and the city blockades were successfully lifted, after which many resistance foci flared up everywhere. This means that the plan to light a match and ignite a bonfire was a success, and humanity begins an active fight against the alien oppressors. Despite the film being labeled as science fiction, the message here is quite realistic. How will humanity behave when it realizes the possibility of its total occupation? Also, the filmmakers draw belief in victory from the history of humanity, using Lenin's motto, "A spark will kindle a flame." The struggle, the underground conspiracy, the film is full of revolutionary stylistics, and it watches like a real political thriller. The movie begins in Leningrad in 1940. A young woman named Anya works as a seamstress in a factory where a young machinist, Vasily, who is very serious, notices her and even asks her to introduce him to her only relative, her brother Peter. However, Anya asks for a little more time, and the young man agrees to wait until the next day. But as the girl leaves for her lunch break, he quietly follows her, admiring her. Anya walks down the street, looking at a dirigible hovering above, from which German journalists are filming the city below. At this moment, a tram driven by Peter pulls up to an intersection. Suddenly, Anya realizes that a fast-moving truck is about to crash into the tram, and her brother will likely perish. Frozen in fear, she suddenly emits light waves that lift the truck into the air and throw it away from the intersection. The tram's windows shatter, injuring people, but a major accident is averted. This entire incident is captured on film by the journalists in the dirigible. As the shocked people try to recover, Peter jumps out of the tram, grabs Anya, and quickly takes her away. The girl regains consciousness in their shared room. Peter packs their belongings, urging his sister to flee Leningrad, although she is reluctant since they have already had to move several times due to her supernatural abilities manifesting at the most inappropriate times and attracting the attention of the authorities. Peter asks her to control her powers, but Anya is unable to master them as they are beyond her control. At that moment, representatives of the People's Commissariat for Internal Affairs burst into the room and arrest the siblings. An investigator named Ivan arrives at the scene. He interviews the victims, and one of the women recalls the strange girl standing at the crossroad. Back at the office, Ivan begins interrogating Anya, but she cannot provide any concrete information. She insists it was just an unfortunate accident, and then Ivan shows her photos from their previous residences where strange incidents and destruction occurred, prompting the siblings to move hastily. The investigator is willing to believe she is not a criminal, especially since he has also witnessed something very strange in his life. However, Ivan is unable to elaborate as his superior, Petrov, who turns out to be his father-in-law, takes Anya and leads her to the secret facilities managed by Professor Ilinsky. The scientist welcomes the girl, explaining that she is special and now they will study her abilities. However, Anya refuses to cooperate until she sees her brother, and Ilinsky promises to arrange a meeting for them. Meanwhile, Ivan cannot calm down, although Petrov, who is also his father-in-law, demands he forget the incident and focus on other matters. He had already barely managed to suppress his absurd report about an incident in Madrid. Returning home, Ivan tries to tell everything to his wife Vera, but she asks him to take a vacation and forget everything that happened. The action shifts to 1936. A group of Soviet soldiers, including Ivan, engages in battle with Spanish fascists in Madrid. Suddenly, a man in a strict coat and hat, wearing a strange mask, appears before them. Looking at the soldiers, he utters something incomprehensible, after which Ivan's comrades start shooting themselves one by one. Only Ivan finds the strength to shoot at the man in the mask. The man quickly disappears, leaving Ivan amidst his fallen comrades. The year is 1940. A man in a mask named Neumann and his assistant Katerina arrive in Munich, where the woman meets a Jewish boy named Baruch on the street, who plays chess brilliantly. She offers him a ride with them, noting he can always leave if he does not like their school. An orphan agrees and gets into the car, where Neumann utters several hissing words, causing Baruch to fall asleep instantly. Neumann agrees that the boy is brilliant, but by no means possesses superpowers. However, Katerina is determined to help the boy. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Professor Ilinsky leads Anya to the laboratory where she will be studied, and fulfilling his promise, brings her to a cell to see her brother. Peter again asks her not to show her abilities, and she promises to write to him. Baruch is brought to an ancient castle owned by Neumann. The boy is laid in a hammock in a hall inhabited by many other teenagers, but when the adults leave, he wakes up and is frightened by the dark silhouettes surrounding him. Back in Moscow, Professor Ilinsky leads Anya to a separate room, more like a cell, and locks her in there. He then reports to Petrov that he has never seen anything like it. The girl is a scientific discovery, a unique case, to which the chief objects. She is a new weapon. Later, Anya is subjected to various tests, but she shows nothing special. Ivan cannot forget the incident, studying everything related to the strange explosion. The video footage of the accident also reaches Neumann, and he decides to fly to the USSR. There, the man is taken to meet with Professor Ilinsky. Neumann introduces himself as a worker from the Ahnenerbe organization and immediately determines that the professor is terminally ill. He offers to ease his pain if the professor allows him to speak with Anya. Ilyinsky does not believe in his abilities, but Neumann utters something, and glowing waves emanate from him, enveloping the professor, causing him to lose consciousness. Taking advantage of this, Neumann searches his desk and takes some papers. Soon, Ilyinsky regains consciousness, but strangely feels no pain. He agrees to arrange a meeting with Anya and leads the German to the laboratory. Neumann approaches the girl and secretly shows her an execution order for her brother. Then waves of unprecedented force begin to emanate from the girl, literally blowing up the entire laboratory. Neumann grabs her and escapes. Ivan sees from the window a man in a hat whom he immediately recognizes and runs to the laboratory where explosions are heard. But Neumann and the girl are nowhere to be found. The narrative shifts to 1924. In a remote Karelian village, a woman lives with two children, Peter and Anya. One day they go with the village boys into the forest. Suddenly a pack of wolves leaps out at the children. The children freeze in fear, but waves emanate from Anya, scattering the beasts. When the men arrive at the clearing, they find the girl dead. 1940. Petrov enters the devastated laboratory, where people connected by tubes into a single organism and marked with the letter M lie in chairs. At first glance, this structure was not damaged by the explosion, as the injured Ilyinsky lying nearby confirms. The professor reports that Anya caused all this and refuses to continue the experiments. Then, Petrov shoots him. Afterward, he goes to Ilyinsky's colleague, who everyone simply calls Professor Lyubov. Petrov asks her to activate the M squad. Learning about the professor's death, the woman refuses to help Petrov, but he reminds her of her family, and Lyubov reluctantly agrees. On the train, a customs officer searches Neumann's compartment and finds an iron sarcophagus with Anya inside. Unsure of what to do, he goes for help. Meanwhile, Anya envisions her own funeral following the incident with the wolves. Frightened, she comes to, and Neumann informs her that he is saving her. Anya tries to run, but the customs officers, who decided to detain the strange German, stop her. However, he utters something, and the military personnel bring their pistols to their own heads. Neumann and Anya leave. At the same time in Moscow, Petrov reports to his colleagues that a member of the Ahnenerbe, which translates to ancestral heritage, Neumann has stolen a valuable exhibit from the USSR, the girl Anya. A squad has already been formed to pursue the German and will depart in a matter of days. Learning of this, Ivan requests to be included, but Petrov, feeling sorry for his daughter, refuses to do so. Neumann leads Anya to a spot where Katerina's car is waiting, and she drives the pair to the castle. It is apparent that the woman does not like Neumann's new toy, but he immediately says that Anya is just like him. At the castle, they are greeted by children whom Neumann calls his army. Anya is escorted to her room, and Neumann finds a guest in his office, Admiral Canaris, who is very interested in the scientist's research. But today he has come to express his displeasure with Neumann's sabotage in the USSR, as it could start a war. Neumann reassures him and invites him to a formal dinner. Meanwhile, Anya is startled by a sound and sees Baruch in her room, trying to open her window to escape the castle. But Katerina and Neumann appear and stop him. While Katerina takes the boy away, Neumann tries to convince Anya that the castle is a paradise, and no one wants to leave of their own volition. Katerina brings Baruch to a bedroom, reminding him that he must speak only German and not tell anyone his real name if he wants to live. But when she leaves, the other teenagers attack him. In Moscow, Ivan asks his wife to help him get enrolled in the squad, after which he goes to Professor Lyubov. He is interested in whether hypnosis can make a person do what another wants. The professor asks him not to travel to Germany, but he is determined to find the man in the mask. In the castle, Anya finds Baruch hanging. The boy tries to explain that the others hate him and beat him, therefore he wants to run away. But Anya admits that it was the same for her until she became strong, and he can too. Later they find Neumann in the park, who promises Anya he will teach her to control her power. He explains that he inherited the castle from the person who adopted him, and now it serves as a refuge. He has set up Anya's room according to her taste and hopes she will like it here. Grateful, Anya sits down at the sewing machine, unexpectedly remembering how the villagers burned their house, calling her a witch. Then her brother saved her, though their mother died in the fire. Back in Moscow, Petrov enrolls Ivan in the squad and asks the commander to ensure that he does not return. Leningrad, 1937. Returning from Madrid, Ivan writes in his report everything he witnessed, but Petrov does not believe him, noting that if the soldiers shot themselves, they could be declared deserters. Tired of trying to convince the young man, Petrov takes him to Professor Lyubov. 1940. A special forces unit travels to Germany in a grain car. Ivan warns his comrades about Neumann's peculiarities, but it seems they don't quite believe him. At the castle, the children undergo daily training, while Anya enjoys the long-forgotten peace. In the morning, Katerina brings her a box with a new dress sent by Neumann for her to wear at his birthday party. The girl goes out to the hall where the children are preparing decorations for the evening, and then they head to training. Baruch is afraid of heights and falls from a rope ladder, but no one pities him. After that, it's time for shooting practice, but the boy throws his pistol down and runs to the local cemetery where Neumann finds him. Baruch asks to be let go, but the scientist promises to teach him not to be afraid. Meanwhile, Squad M climbs out of the wagon, and Ivan remembers his training in 1936 before being sent to Madrid. Then his comrades met him coldly because he was the boss's son-in-law, but Ivan earned respect through hard work and cleverness. And now he is on a special mission. Suddenly, they are hailed by an old man who turns out to be their liaison and must take them to the castle. At the same time, Petrov is informed that the squad has successfully crossed the border. Guests start arriving at the castle. Neumann welcomes Canaris and escorts him to the hall where music plays, and ladies and gentlemen drink and talk about the beautiful evening. Neumann himself is enchanted by Anya's beauty, and she gives him a hand-embroidered handkerchief she made for him. Later, guests deliver laudatory speeches in honor of the birthday boy, and he invites Anya to dance to the envy of the present ladies. Canaris notices Katerina's displeasure, but the woman remains cold, rejecting his advances. She dislikes Canaris's interest in their wards, and he tells her that people are already coming for Anya from the USSR. Squad M reaches the forest house of their liaison, who supplies them with weapons and draws a path on a map, but then shots ring out. German soldiers have caught up with the saboteurs. A battle ensues and the Russians win. Later, the commander finishes off the wounded enemies and, unexpectedly for Ivan, shoots the liaison, indicating that they have no orders to return. At the castle, Canaris agrees to play chess with Baruch, and the boy wins. The admiral admires his genius, but upon learning that the boy is Jewish, he pulls out a pistol. Anya sees the man aiming at the child, and her powers activate. Guests watch in horror as everything in the hall begins to rise into the air. The admiral himself is lifted up, but at that moment Neumann grabs the girl by the shoulder. She faints, and Canaris falls to the floor. Everything stops immediately, but people scream and scatter. The furious admiral orders all children to be destroyed within 3 days and departs. Neumann escorts Anya to her room and admires her because today she managed to stop. The girl does not understand why it is necessary to destroy the Jews, and Neumann reminds her that no one pitied them either, as they were not like everyone else. The man returns to his office where Katerina awaits him, but he does not accept her attentions because he is seriously captivated by Anya and hopes to succeed with her. However, Katerina is saddened by this turn in their relationship and reminds him of Canaris's order, but Neumann intends to make a profitable deal. The action shifts to Neumann's childhood when children laughed at him and drove him away. His parents were forced to put a mask with a digital lock on him so he couldn't harm anyone, and the boy suffered greatly from this. One day his father complained to the landlord that his son was hindering his ability to fulfill his duties as a tenant, and the man came to see the unusual child. They explained to him that Neumann scared all the guests and caused his father to lose a finger. The year is 1940. The morning after the dinner, Anya goes out to the hall, but the servants who witnessed yesterday's incident look at her warily. Then the girl goes to the park where she is met by an armed Katerina, but seeing the guards, she returns to the house. Later, Neumann conducts a meditation for the teenagers, asking Thor to give them strength. Anya sees this and asks for permission to start training. Neumann orders Katerina to stay at the castle and wait for guests, and he takes Anya away. Meanwhile, the squad continues to move through the forest. Soon they find a rubber boat at the prearranged place. Neumann puts Anya on his personal plane and takes her to his parents' house. Landing, they walk across a bridge and suddenly Neumann asks the girl to remember her brother. Her powers activate. Water rises up, carrying fish and creating a reverse waterfall. But then the man calls her, Anya comes to her senses, and everything returns to normal. However, now she can use her powers when she needs to. Soon they enter an old house and Neumann recalls how he was taken from his father's home. Lastly, his mother writes down the password to his mask on a piece of paper, and little Newman leaves their lives forever.
In the present, he tells that his father was a harsh and cruel man, often beating him and his mother, so he promised himself that his child would never be unhappy. The man remembers how his patron removed his mask and wanted to throw it away, but Newman did not allow it. The man informed him that he would now take care of him, but he must trust him. Soon they arrived at the castle, where the patron confessed that every person has the right to be happy, and the boy lived for the first time like a normal child. But a year later, war came. His patron went away on business, and their home turned into a hospital. Neumann helped as best he could. Once he had to assist in the amputation of a leg. The soldier was in great pain, and then Neumann activated his powers and relieved the poor man of his suffering during the operation. Later he confessed to one of the nurses that he loved her. The adult woman laughed at the boy but said she loved him too. But one day he caught his nurse with one of the recovering soldiers, and in a fit of rage he made the soldier kill himself with a hammer. They caught him, gagged him, tied him up, and took him away from the castle. In 1940 he tells Anya that his parents died, so he is so happy to have found her. The girl lights candles in the fireplace, using her new powers, which delights Newman. They drink wine and then become close. At night, Anya dreams where Baruch dies and wakes up terrified. She asks Newman to return to the castle. Meanwhile, the squad reaches the river. One of the soldiers is wounded and runs out of strength. Then he takes his own life so as not to be a burden to his comrades. Only 3 remain, but they still row towards the castle. And there Katerina, who can't sleep, reminisces about the past when she helped her mother, who worked in a psychiatric hospital, where one day they brought in a tied-up boy named Neumann. She then freed him, and he promised never to harm her. The year is 1936, Leningrad. Petrov attends a lecture by Professor Ilyinsky, where he discusses a significant discovery in the field of controlling human memory and emotions. Ilyinsky's colleague, Professor Lyubov, is inspired by the future changes, as people with good mental health will be able to work better and create a brilliant future for themselves and their children. The Project M envisions a new society where happy people with immense productivity and willpower will live. Petrov asks about the use of these discoveries in the military sphere, arguing that if a new society is to be built, it must be able to defend itself. However, Lyubov categorically opposes totalitarianism. After the lecture, Petrov offers Ilyinsky full support for their program if he agrees to operate under military auspices. But Ilyinsky sends him to Lyubov as the ideational inspiration behind the project. However, the woman flatly refuses to cooperate with the military. That same day, she is hit by a car in the street. Later, Petrov returns to Ilyinsky, informing him of the unfortunate accident with his colleague, and Ilyinsky reluctantly agrees to cooperate. Again, 1940-year Germany. The 3 remaining members of the squad reach the castle's territory. Surprised by the lack of security, they enter the premises. Petrov receives a summary of incidents in a specific area of Germany and realizes that everything is going according to plan. His boss is horrified. His people have left a very noticeable trail, which could easily lead to the USSR being accused of provocation. But Petrov assures him that everything was planned this way and there will be no international conflict. At that moment, his daughter calls and he rushes home. The squad members reach the castle and, splitting up, begin to explore the premises. Meanwhile, Petrov finds Vera in a hysterical state. She is going mad with worry for her husband, and the father decides to take action. At the same time in the castle, Katerina reads a book to the children, and seeing her nervousness, they calm the woman. She orders lights out and leaves, just as Ivan enters the hall from the other side. Seeing the children in front of him, the man lowers his weapon and leaves. The children remain motionless. The soldiers continue to explore the castle, and now the squad leader enters the hall with the children. But he does not lower his weapon and prepares to shoot. Then the children attack first. The commander fires in all directions, but the teenagers throw their clothes at him and knock him down. The eldest orders the pistol handed to Baruch to kill the enemy, but the boy cannot shoot the man, and the man manages to wound him with a knife before being killed. The children carry the bleeding Baruch to the bedroom, leaving the soldier's body on the hall floor. The 3rd squad member, a female warrior, finds Katerina's office and engages her in a shootout. Katerina flees, but the woman catches up to her, and they fight. The woman is defeated when Katerina pushes her away. Seeing her opponent unconscious,
The German grabs a pistol but doesn't manage to shoot because Ivan appears. Threatening him with a pistol, the woman captures him. In Moscow, Petrov brings his daughter to Professor Lyubov and asks her to erase the girl's memory. Lyubov is outraged by this request, as the love for a husband is the most precious thing in Vera's life. However, under military pressure, she agrees and performs the necessary manipulations, while Petrov's subordinates methodically clear their apartment of photographs and items belonging to Ivan. But one photograph falls under a chest of drawers, and the soldier does not notice it. After the procedure, the girl regains consciousness but does not remember her husband at all. At this time, the teenagers attack Ivan, not noticing Katerina, and wound him in the arm. The woman drives off the aggressive children and escorts the wounded man to Neuman's office, where she admits to Ivan that she recognized him because she had seen him in Madrid. He asked why her master kidnapped Anya. Could it be that he wants to use her in the war? Katerina assures him that he still doesn't understand. People are petty and greedy creatures fighting for power. Neumann is unique. He is ready to seize all power on Earth to save the world from war. Meanwhile, Neumann and Anya arrive at the castle and find a wounded woman on the threshold. The scientist finishes her off with a pistol while Anya runs to the bedroom to the teenagers and finds Baruch dead. At this time, Ivan is bandaging himself while Katerina explains that they teach the children survival by developing their skills, because their destiny is to save the world under Neumann's leadership. The woman offers to help him escape if he will help her, but before Ivan can hear her out, Neumann enters the door. The Russian immediately picks up a pistol and takes the woman hostage. However, the German informs him that he does not care about her fate, which visibly upsets her. At that moment, Anya runs into the office and uses her power to knock Ivan off his feet, but when she recognizes the man, Neumann quickly takes her away, leaving the Russian with Katerina. In Moscow, Professor Lyubov mourns Ilyinsky when Petrov brings her folders with the names of the condemned, whom she can save by including them in Squad M. She remembers how after the accident, Ilyinsky came to her in the hospital. The man was shocked to learn that she had been mutilated by the military, but he was frightened and could not refuse to cooperate. Now the woman is alone and forced to make difficult decisions. She takes out a vial of M activator and recalls Ivan's story about the man in the mask. After his return from Madrid, she worked with his memory, suggesting removing the traumatic memories of his comrades' deaths, but Ivan refused to erase his life. And now the young man is chained in a cell in the castle of the man in the mask. Later, Anya visits him, accusing him of killing Baruch, but the boy denies it, and he is not particularly interested in her fate. He only wants to destroy Neumann because all evil comes from him. He hypnotizes children, turning them into killers. Their conversation is interrupted by Naumann's appearance. After sending Anya away, he thanks the young man for revealing his vulnerability, as he is the only one who could stand up to him. To prove it, the scientist shows the finger shot off by Ivan in Madrid. He too is special, and Neumann really wants the Russian to join his side. Yes, he killed his friends, but it was war. He came to Annanerba to find gifted people. Anya is like him, and they are the future. He asks Ivan to admit why he is immune to his hypnosis. Then Ivan reveals that there is a whole squad like him, Squad M. There are many of them, and they will all be here soon. So Neumann cannot hide. After talking with Ivan, Neumann finds Anya in the castle's backyard. The girl asks him to hand over all affairs to Katerina and to leave this place forever. But Neumann does not want to run because they are extraordinary people, and when they are together they are unbeatable. He asks for her help in defending their new home. Later, he thanks Katerina for managing the situation and confesses that he is glad she was not hurt during the Russian raid. Meanwhile, Anya remembers how in Moscow she wrote letters to her brother while locked up in the laboratory. She used to give them to the professor, but she could not have imagined that he read her letters to Peter, who was undergoing mental processing as a participant in Squad M. At this time, she burns them in the backyard of the castle, hoping that life will give her a chance to start over. Later, the castle's inhabitants conduct a funeral rite for Baruch. The teenagers carry the boy's body to the seashore, where the cemetery is located, and burn it on a ritual pyre. Anya is shocked by the number of children's graves and realizes that Ivan was telling the truth. Katerina urges her to leave and save herself. Anya runs to Ivan's cell and asks him to tell her what he saw in Madrid that was so special. The boy talks about the death of his comrades and Neumann's chilling whisper, but the German doesn't know that he just had a misfire. He is not special and survived only because of the pistol's malfunction, but if Neumann finds out, he will kill him immediately. And only Anya can stand up to him. Out of the darkness comes Katerina, who has heard everything. She will let them go if they leave forever. Neumann is planning to sell the children to Canaris, and Anya can do nothing about it. They are weapons, and it is high time the Russian understood this. But Anya runs away while Katerina frees Ivan from his chains and advises him to make sure the German never finds them. Meanwhile in Moscow, Petrov enjoys his daughter's good mood, hoping she will meet another man, marry, and give him grandchildren. The girl is lively and cheerful, unaware that the photo under the dresser awaits its moment. At this time, Neumann orders the Russian man to be killed, and he goes to look for Anya. Meanwhile, Katerina leads Ivan to her car, where Neumann guard catches up with them. He engages in a fight with the Russian, and when he is about to kill him, Katerina attacks the guard. The guard is much stronger, and Katerina has to shoot. The teenagers hear the sound and run into the courtyard while Katerina puts Ivan in the car and drives him away from the estate. Neumann finds Anya at the cemetery. The girl asks him to let the children go, but he refuses. They are insignificant to him because he hopes to build a new world using their combined powers. Moreover, they will definitely have a son who will be the strongest and greatest on the planet. Hearing this, Anya wants to leave. Then Neumann sees Katerina's car and realizes what she is about to do. He puts on his quantum mask, which greatly amplifies the power of his voice, and begins to speak while Ivan stands on the car step and aims an assault rifle at him. The mask works. Katerina's car loses control and crashes from a high cliff into the water, but Ivan manages to jump from the step and survives. Then, members of the second squad M, who were heading to the castle, covering for the distracting maneuvers of the first squad, open fire on Neumann. But the soldiers are programmed for total destruction, and one of them engages in a fight with Ivan, not realizing he is an ally. The young man has to kill the soldier. Neumann asks Anya to activate her power, and the girl begins to do so when she recognizes one of the soldiers as her brother. Neumann is knocked down by her force, rocks crash from the sky, and the girl runs to Peter, realizing that this time he is indeed dead. Anya's powers activate again when Neumann falls from Ivan's shot. The girl mourns her brother as teenagers appear on the road. Ivan grabs Anya and drags her away while the children pick up Neumann's body and carry it into the castle. The Russians run to the airplane and manage to take off at the last moment. 9 months later, Neumann, who survived the injury, listens to Hitler's speeches and experiments with a new kind of influence on people, broadcasting his voice through radio equipment. Meanwhile, in Anya's native village, a bearded Ivan arrives from the woods as his woman is about to give birth. Pregnant Anya is dragged into the village where women come to help. As the birth proceeds, an announcement about the start of the war with Germany is broadcast from the speakers. Later, surrounded by streams of power, Anya gives birth to a healthy baby boy. Neumann is immediately informed by a fortune-telling girl. Then one of the villagers recognizes Anya and hurries to tell his fellow villagers whom they have just helped. But Ivan stops him when bombers appear in the sky, from which a large number of paratroopers descend.